Chapter 1981. Meg's voice was a little cold, and so was his heart. He had killed tens of thousands of innocent people for his own selfish desire to become stronger. Such behavior was no different from that of a devil. Mellant looked at Meg and said, "We need to find him as soon as possible. With his current power, he can easily destroy a town without powerhouses guarding it. The more people he kills, the stronger he will become. It's not just killing people. His motive is probably to start a new racial war. If it's just one or two small villages, he won't be satisfied either," Meg said in a low voice. "You know him very well." "I do know a lot about the enemy." Meg laughed self-deprecatingly. It was a pity that he didn't kill Josh back then because he thought he knew him very well. That was why there was such a massacre today. "Then where can we go to find him?" Mellant asked. "Let's sweep through the Twilight Forest first. If there's nothing there, we'll enter the borders of the Roth Empire and do a sweep." Meg thought for a while, and said, "Before the cleanup is completed, Andre won't be in a hurry to start a new war. He's someone who needs to have complete control of the situation. However, Josh won't wait. He will definitely start a new conflict. It's completely reasonable for the orcs to launch a revenge attack on the Roth Empire now. All right, we'll look for him according to your judgment." Mellant nodded. He didn't doubt Meg's judgment at all. Impressive. "I didn't expect Alex to not only be powerful, but he's also an outstanding strategist. It's really admirable." Noah looked at Meg with admiration. Everyone boarded the Griffin again, and Meg got Ozzy to start scanning the Twilight Forest. The scanning distance of 250 kilometers allowed the originally difficult carpet search to be realized. However, the Twilight Forest was very vast. Even with Ozzy's speed, it still took them 2 hours to finish the sweep. The purple-striped griffin stopped at the edge of the Twilight Forest, and Mellant said, he only stayed for a short while at the few suspicious places. From the traces of the demonic aura, he might have entered the Roth Empire, or gone to the north where there are few people. "Let's go to the borders to take a look." Meg nodded. He rode the purple-striped griffin into the Roth Empire's borders, and began to patrol along the borders. After entering the Roth Empire, the presence of the demonic aura became much weaker. It was scattered, but there was no order or pattern. In the end, it disappeared mysteriously, and there was no trace of it at all. Melander's expression was a little complicated. He said in a low voice, he should have found a way to hide his demon aura. "I'm afraid it's impossible to find him by following his demon aura. We can only continue to investigate. As long as he appears in the range of the hybrid turtle shell stone, we can lock him down." Meg looked at the gradually brightening sky. After searching for an entire night, he still couldn't find Josh. That guy's anti-reconnaissance ability was the most troublesome. "It's time for me to go back. I'll leave this place to you guys. Keep in touch at all times. If you find someone, don't be in a hurry to take action. Let me know first." "I'll rush over as soon as possible," Meg said to the two of them. "All right, you must have something very important to do. Please take care." Noah nodded with an understanding expression. "It's nothing important. My wife and children are waiting at home. I'll go back and have an early sleep," Meg said calmly. Noah opened his mouth and revealed a bitter smile. "Listen, is this something a human would say? Let's go." Meg patted Ozzy's back, and Ozzy rose into the air and flew in the direction of Chaos City. Meanwhile, Meg closed his eyes and began to rest. "Grandpa, what should we do now?" Noah asked dejectedly. They were the only ones left in the quiet mountain ridge. "I saw a military camp over there just now. Go get an ironback eagle, and we'll continue to patrol." Now that we have a target, and the scanning area has expanded so much, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Melander was very excited. He didn't look tired at all even though he didn't sleep for the entire night. Alright, I'll start acting as bait. Noah turned and flew towards the military camp in the distance. He was half floating like a ghost. It was already 5:30 a.m. when Meg reached home. He went upstairs to take a shower, and meditated for 15 minutes before he got up and went downstairs to prepare breakfast and the morning service as usual. As a man who had stepped into the demigod realm, he didn't feel tired at all after a night without sleep. However, he still couldn't find Josh even though he had brought a huge human flesh scanner with him this time. That was a little disappointing. You didn't find him. Irina had come downstairs at some point. She was standing at the kitchen door and leaning against the door frame as she looked at Meg, who was in a daze while cooking the porridge. He's not in the Twilight Forest, nor at the border of the Roth Empire. I'm a little curious where that fellow is hiding. Meg stirred the porridge in the pot slowly. Andre has returned to Rodu. The possibility of him bypassing Andre and starting another war is not high unless he can become the king of the Roth Empire. Irina smiled. That's what he's been dreaming of. After absorbing the resentment and blood essence, his power is above 9th tier, but not 10th tier. It's impossible for him to kill Andre and Josh and suppress all opposition to becoming the king of the Roth Empire with this power. Meg shook his head. Even I would find it difficult to kill Andre, who is in the royal palace of Rodu. But he's Josh, one of Andre's favorite sons. He's the second prince who has the highest chance of becoming the next emperor of the Roth Empire. Furthermore, he sold his soul to the devil. This time, he was able to bypass Andre and mobilize the military to start a war against the orcs and elves at the same time. This already proves that he can't be judged by common sense. Irina's expression was very serious. Meg fell silent upon hearing that. He thought about what Irina said seriously. The power that the Great Old One gave Josh was unknown, and his identity was indeed very special. However, it's not necessarily a bad thing if Andre dies. That old fox is bad. He's harder to deal with than Josh and Sean, and he's very ambitious. Irina smiled. And as long as Josh ascends to the throne, he'll be in the open. By then, it'll be much easier for us to find and kill him. Meg nodded. Perhaps I should find time to make a trip to Rodu. The longer we delay, the stronger he'll become. I'm afraid it'll be too late when he's completely replaced by the Great Old One. I'll go with you then. Only the holy light can purify the demonic aura. I'll send him to heaven personally. Irina's voice was a little cold. Oh, yes. Do you know anything about the ghost race? Those two fellows yesterday were from the ghost race, Meg asked again. Ghost race? I think I saw some records about it in the library many years ago. Didn't this demon race go extinct in the racial war a few hundred years ago? Chapter 1982. Your Majesty, these are the testimonies of the officials from the Ministry of War. Judging from their testimonies, the second prince must have used hypnotic magic to control them and mobilized the northwestern and southeastern allied forces to attack the orcs and elves in your name, an official said respectfully as he walked into the royal study with a thick stack of testimonies in his hands. Andre flipped through the report at the top and slammed his hand on the table. A bunch of trash. The official shuddered slightly and lowered his head even more. Lock up the officials from the Ministry of War first. Don't let any of them out, and don't let any related news leak out. Andre quickly regained his composure and said in a low voice, capture all the mages from the mage tower who came into contact with Josh that day, and then have Richard come to see me. Yes, Your Majesty, the official replied and quickly left. Very good. After so many years, you've finally come up with something different for me. I'd like to see what exactly you want. The door of the Imperial study slowly closed, but Andre's face revealed a cold smile that was hard to decipher. He was the one who had created the situation of two sons fighting for the throne. The road to the throne had always been full of thorns and blood, which could very well enhance a person's strategy and courage, thereby nurturing a cold-blooded and powerful monarch. That was how he had gotten to the throne back then, so he gave Josh an opportunity and Sean a threat. Over the years, Sean had been running the military wholeheartedly, constantly making contributions on the northwestern front line and gaining a lot of support and prestige in the military. Josh, on the other hand, had become the disciple of the Mage Tower's president and had shown his prowess in the officialdom, gaining the support of many civil officials. However, the two of them seemed to be on par, but in Andre's eyes, it was still not enough. Back then, as the sixth prince, he had defeated his brothers one by one and finally ascended to the throne. However, Josh's plan to assassinate Alex and cut off one of Sean's arms came as a surprise to him. Back then, Alex's achievements overshadowed the Emperor's, and his close relationship with Sean did indeed make him a little wary, so he did not stop Josh's actions and even secretly removed some obstacles for him. What he didn't expect was that Sean had also become Josh's accomplice in this operation, which led to the assassination on that rainy night. This eliminated his doubts about Sean and greatly reduced Sean's courage and strategy in his mind. If Sean had saved Alex at all costs that rainy night, he might be the one sitting here now. In the end, Joshua did not kill Alex. Instead, he crippled him and allowed him to leave, creating the current situation where the father and son had a powerful mortal enemy. It was an extremely foolish decision. However, although Alex was strong, he was not invincible. As long as he stayed in the palace, even Alex would not dare to barge in and kill him. The threat of his death was not unsolvable to Joshua. However, right at this time, Josh had taken advantage of the fact that they were heading to Chaos City to wage war against both the orcs and elves. Furthermore, he had issued an order to slaughter both of them. What was the reason for that? Andre had been thinking about it for a day and a night, but he still could not figure it out. If they wanted to catch the orcs off guard, they had grasped the opportunity. If they had mobilized the troops from the other military regions in advance and formulated a more complete battle plan, they might really have been able to take down the entire Twilight Forest. However, what was the reason for attacking the Wind Forest? As one of the few friendly neighbors of the Roth Empire, the elves had maintained a good relationship with them for thousands of years. However, the battle that almost invaded the City of Life had completely destroyed this relationship, and pushed the elves to the side of the peace alliance. Regardless of whether it was war or negotiation, Josh had thrown out his best card in advance. Unfilial son, you've ruined me. Andre sighed heavily. Bastard. 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 Oster slammed a table as he listened to his subordinate's report of the orcs' casualties. Most of the tribes at the border were in the war faction that relied on the August tribe. They had been fighting against the Roth Empire for many years, and had maintained their bloodthirst and combat power. However, the Roth Empire's invasion this time had massacred dozens of tribes, and caused the war faction's scale and numbers to be greatly reduced. Even the August tribe was almost conquered. We don't have any powerhouses left to guard us. We can't resist their cavalry. An injured orc chief said softly. Shut up. Oster glanced at him coldly. The orcs in the tent were all looking at Oster with a dark expression. They wanted to say something, but they did not. Oster was afraid of Alex, so he brought all the 10th tier powerhouses with him when he went to participate in the peace conference. He even brought some 9th tier powerhouses with him as guards. This caused the orcs to not have enough powerhouses to fight against the enemy's powerhouses when the Roth Empire's northwestern allied army invaded. There was no one to organize them, and all the tribes fought on their own. Thus, they were defeated one by one. Why don't we join the Peace Alliance too? The Roth Empire is too powerful. Our power has been greatly reduced, and we can't fight against them anymore. A tribal chief broke the silence. I agree too. The orcs have split into two factions internally. The peace faction is stronger than us now. I'm afraid we can't even defeat the dwarves and goblins. How are we going to fight against the Roth Empire? Another tribal chief quickly chimed in. I don't agree. The Roth Empire has killed so many of our people and massacred so many of our tribes. If we join the Peace Alliance, shouldn't we take revenge for them? You may be able to swallow such humiliation, but I can't. That's right. We should also organize a group of powerhouses to attack the Roth Empire and massacre dozens of their cities to take revenge for our people. Another voice of objection sounded immediately. The war faction and both sides quickly fell into a heated debate. Some even drew out their weapons, looking like they were going to spill blood if they disagreed. Oster knew he was in the wrong. He looked at the tribal chiefs who were gradually getting out of control with a dark expression. In the central square of the Falk tribe, there were dozens of carriages loaded with all kinds of materials parked there. Connie stood in front of a carriage and said to the orc leading the team, "Send this batch of materials to the Crow tribe overnight. They have suffered heavy losses in this war. I will get 3 magic casters who are good at healing to bring the herbs along with you." "Yes, Chief. I will ensure that the materials are delivered safely," that orc replied respectfully. "Also, this batch of materials is for the Chilla tribe. Their tribe has been breached, and they need to rebuild now." Connie pointed at the 2 carriages at the side. "Chief, the Chilla tribe is part of the war faction, right? Why should we help them?" That orc looked at and perplexedly. "When war comes, the enemy will only attack all the orc tribes that can be attacked. They won't differentiate between the war faction and the peace faction." Connie looked at that orc and shook his head slightly. "No matter which faction we belong to, we are all orcs first and foremost. We belong to the same race." That orc nodded thoughtfully. Chapter 1983. Very soon, Connie arranged all the resources in the square personally, and watched as the transportation team sent the carts of resources to the tribes that were attacked. Although the chief is young, he's very organized and approachable. He's quite similar to the old chief. Yes. Our Falk tribe has profited from a disaster. We didn't fall into the hands of the demons, and we even got such a capable chief. The war faction has lost a lot this time because of that coward, Oster. I wonder if they will still follow that fellow to the end. Some orcs were discussing softly, and they were full of praises for Connie. Connie walked past calmly, and her slightly curled lips exposed her feelings. "Master, didn't I do very well?" "I heard a lot of praises for me," Connie said excitedly to Rex, who was sitting in the carriage, as she climbed onto a horse-drawn carriage that was parked not far away. Rex nodded expressionlessly. Not bad. This praise is not sincere at all." Connie pursed her lips, but she was still smiling. "We are going to the Hawk tribe now," Rex said to Connie. "Aren't they following Oster? Their chief wants to join us, the peace faction, but there are disagreements within the tribe. Then, are we going to persuade them?" Connie asked thoughtfully. "No, we are going to resolve the disagreements," Rex said indifferently. "Good. That's very powerful." Connie gave him a thumbs up silently. The horse-drawn carriage drove out of the Falk tribe, and quickly disappeared into the night. In this war, due to the Roth Empire's sudden attack and Oster's foolish deployment, the warring tribes have suffered heavy losses. Oster's reputation has also plummeted. Many tribes have already left the warring faction and joined us, the peace faction. We have to take this opportunity to bring them over to the peace faction so that the peace faction can represent the voice of the orcs, Rex said. Connie nodded. Then, what are we going to do? You convince them with your virtue, and I will convince them with my strength, Rex said seriously. All right. Connie also nodded seriously. The Wind Forest. An elf walked into the starry cavern, and turned to Helena, who was sitting on the platform with her back facing the cave entrance, with her legs crossed, and said, High Priestess, the leaders of the Kint family and Bard family wish to see you in person. They have something to report to you. Helena's cold voice sounded, Capture them and behead them in public in Life Square tomorrow. If they have anything to say, let them say it to all the elves face to face. Yes. The elf's expression turned cold as he quickly left the cave. High Priest, please spare my life. Soon, 2 cries could be heard from outside the cave. However, the cries soon disappeared. High Priest, more and more clans in the City of Life have announced that they will burn the slave contracts and free their slaves. The situation has gone out of control. There are also many elves marching on the streets despite the protests, saying that they want to completely eliminate slavery and make all elves equal. There are also many elven nobles and veteran nobles among them. Not long after, Elliot rushed into the starry cave abode and looked at Helena anxiously. Helena, who had her back facing the cave, finally stood up and turned to look down at Elliot. Elliot quickly said, High Priest, we had better send the guards to capture all of them quickly. If this matter gets out of hand, it won't be easy to clean up the mess. The entire foundation of the Wind Forest will be shaken. These people are really muddle-headed. If everyone was as clear-headed as you, the Wind Forest and the City of Life would belong to the Roth Empire now, Helena said with a hint of mockery. Elliot's expression changed drastically. His knees gave way, and he knelt on the ground. He trembled as he said, High Priest, I am absolutely loyal to the elves. I only did this because I was worried that the elves would be destroyed. However, I was really thinking for the elves wholeheartedly. I think you are just afraid of death. If your territory was in the north, you would have fled like those idiots who ran away immediately or welcomed the Roth Empire's cavalry into the forest, right? Helena's smile became more and more mocking. How could that be? I will definitely do my best to protect the forest. I won't even dare to take a step back. Elliot's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He lowered his head and didn't dare to look at Helena. Helena stared at Elliot, who was kneeling on the ground, for a long time. Elliot's head lowered until it was buried in the ground. His body was trembling slightly. Ha! A disdainful and mocking laugh sounded in the cave abode. From today onwards, you will be stripped of all your duties and identities. Go back to your castle and die alone. Helena sneered at Elliot. This is the lightest punishment I can give you on account of Sally. You should be glad that you have a good daughter. Thank you, High Priest. Elliot seemed to have been drained of all his energy. He staggered up from the ground and scrambled out of the starry cave abode. Men. Helena's voice came out of the cave abode. Soon, some elves entered the cave abode. Pass down my orders. Don't stop the elves from marching on the streets. I want to see if they have made the right choice this time, Helena said calmly. Yes. That elf left quickly. Helena actually didn't send troops to stop or arrest the marching elves. What is Helena plotting this time? Snare stood by the window on the second floor of a 2-story building. He looked at the elves marching on the streets, and the scattered guards who were watching from afar with furrowed brows. The invasion of the Roth Empire had a huge impact on the Wind Forest. When the elves discovered that the extravagant domain lords who had been granted territories chose to surrender and flee in the face of the invaders, it was the low-level elves who had been oppressed and exploited by the elves who stood up bravely and protected the City of Life and the Wind Forest just like they had 100 years ago. Elves had extremely long lifespans. Many elves who had participated in the racial war were still living in the City of Life. When their memories were awakened, they saw their brothers and friends who had fought alongside them in the past. They and their descendants had become lowly servants. The shame made them unable to enjoy everything silently. Thus, nobles began to burn slave contracts and slave contracts. More and more elves began to march on the streets demanding equality and freedom. This was a good thing, and it was also a good thing for the night elves. However, what was strange to Snare was that the elven guards didn't do anything. Helena, who had always viewed freedom as a scourge, was silently allowing this to happen in the City of Life. Chapter 1984. Although the situation is turbulent, this is not a reason for us to delay the update. Add Mr. Max Eggplant with Garlic tutorial and put it after Mr. Max interview draft. Give the cover the biggest title. I want to see this sample issue today, and the new issue will be released as usual in 3 days. Let the printing plant prepare for additional printing. In the chief editor's office, Garland looked at the editorial staff present and said seriously. But Mr. Max said before that he wanted to publish the 2 articles in 2 parts, Milo said. And if we add it at the last minute, it will take a lot of work. It will be difficult to publish the sample issue today, another supervisor in charge of typesetting said. In this situation, no one knows which will come first, tomorrow or an accident. If this is the last issue of Whole Foods, I hope it can leave something in the history of the magazine. Garland's gaze swept across everyone present. I know that all of you are passionate about this industry, and you are passionate about the magazine. Anything is possible, isn't it? The eyes of the people present lit up. They all clicked on the pictures and got up to work. After everyone left, Milo, who was still in his original position, looked at Garland suspiciously. He lowered his voice and said, "Is that really the case?" Garland closed the door behind him, walked to the desk, and sat down. He sighed faintly. Nonsense. The big boss was worried that the situation would worsen and wanted to make a last profit, so he asked me to publish Mr. Mac's article in advance. Milo smiled when he heard that. But the truth is not too far off. If this is the last issue, missing Mr. Max Eggplant with Garlic tutorial will definitely be the biggest regret. Yes, Mr. Mac is not only good at cooking, but also at writing gourmet tutorials. It even makes me wonder if he has written gourmet reviews before. Does he have a hidden identity? Garland agreed. At first, he wanted Meg to dictate, Milo to write down, and then process it into a draft. Later, Meg said that he wanted to write it himself, and he was ready to let Milo write for him. In the end, after getting Mr. Mac's manuscript, the 2 of them were shocked. The writing was smooth and natural, and the language was simple and lively. They turned a recipe tutorial into a piece of excellent and beautiful writing. It was educational and fun, and Milo admitted defeat. If she hadn't seen Mr. Mac's culinary skills in Amy's booming business, Garland would have had the urge to make Meg a professional gourmet. It would be a pity to waste such a talent. Will the situation really worsen? Milo asked softly. The citizens of Rodu were also a little uneasy these 2 days. After a long period of peace, although the Roth Empire was very powerful now, the mention of war still made people afraid. Garland sighed, then she shook her head and said, "Ordinary people like us don't know much, but I've heard that dozens of beast-man tribes have been destroyed by us. This matter can't be settled peacefully, so we should pray for our own good." At noon, Meg received a letter from the editorial department of Whole Foods, informing him that the issue of Eggplant with Garlic sauce would be published in advance. Meg didn't have much of an opinion about this. Just as Garland and the rest had judged, the current situation was unstable, and no one knew what would happen tomorrow. Whether it was for economic benefits or the ideals of the magazine's editors, he could accept the issue of the tutorial being published in advance. Moreover, he now hoped that this eggplant with garlic sauce tutorial could bring him more faith. After reaching the peak of the path of becoming a knight, he could only try this path of spreading delicacies to improve his culinary skills. The turbulent situation was not conducive to the spread of delicacies. When one's life was in danger, who would care about delicacies? Survival was the most important thing. We still have to work hard to maintain world peace. Meg could hear the occasional worried conversation of the customers outside as he cooked in the kitchen. Although Chaos City was a neutral city, if there was a racial war, no power could be absolutely neutral, and they couldn't stay out of the chaos. "Father, when can we go out and have fun? Just like when we went to that island last time. I like the feeling of dressing up as someone else." After the lunch service, Amy went up to Meg, who had just taken off his chef's uniform and sat down, looking at him expectantly. "Amy, do you want to go on a long-term trip?" Meg looked at Amy with a smile. Yes. Amy nodded her little head. "Okay, then Father will arrange the time to take you and on a trip, or to another place to open a small restaurant for a while." Meg nodded with a smile. It was rare for the little one to have a holiday, so he should take her out to have fun. "There's one more thing. I don't know if Father will agree to it." Amy tapped her index fingers together, a little hesitant. "What is it, Meg?" Meg asked gently. Amy looked up at Meg, and softly said, "I haven't seen my old friends in a long time. Jessica said Teacher Luna prepared a lot of food for them, and they have a place to stay. I want to go and see them. Can you cook something nice for them?" Meg looked at the little one's sparkling eyes, and couldn't help but feel a little touched. Although the little one had been busy with magic cultivation and the restaurant recently, she was still that little cutie who cared about her friends. "Of course. Then Father will go with you. I'll bring the kitchen utensils and barbecue for the children." Meg nodded with a smile. "That's great. Father, I love you." Amy jumped up happily, hugged Meg's neck, and kissed him on the cheek. "Then I'll go and get ready. You and can play for a while." Meg smiled and patted Amy's head, then got up and walked to the kitchen. Half an hour later, Meg carried 2 grills, an ice cream maker, and a box full of ingredients, and went out with Amy and Anne. Along the way, Amy chattered and told about her life on the streets. However, that sad experience was full of fun and adventure from her mouth, as if all the dangers and difficulties were insignificant interludes, not even as important as a biscuit. And listened quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes worried, and sometimes touched Amy's head with pity. Although she still couldn't speak, she could completely understand the common language. "We're here." The carriage stopped, and the coachman's voice sounded from outside. Meg lifted the curtain and walked out. Looking at the brand-new greenhouse and the picturesque walls in front of him, a smile appeared on his face. This orphanage was like a kindergarten. The bright but not dazzling colors, the buildings, and the childish murals all made people feel the thriving vitality. It was obvious that Luna had put in a lot of effort to give the children a new home. No pop-up window. Chapter 1985. This orphanage was built by Luna's foundation in the northern part of the city for the children living on the streets. It was a very large 2-story building with more than 500 children in it. The walls encircled a large courtyard of 500 square meters, and there were some simple entertainment facilities in the courtyard. There were also more than a dozen staff members in charge of the children's daily needs. Luna had told him about this before. Solving the problem of the children's survival was more important than letting them go to school. As for the children whose parents were still alive, the foundation also helped them. The city lord's mansion provided them with a batch of unoccupied houses as low-rent housing, which was almost free for them to stay in. They also actively solved the employment problem for the adults so that they could at least survive. Thank you, Master. Meg gave 2 silver coins to the coachman who helped to unload the goods, and the extra silver coin was a tip. Thank you. The coachman was a little flattered as he accepted the silver coins and hurriedly thanked him. Normally, he wouldn't be able to earn so much money in a day, and he only left after helping to carry the goods into the orphanage. Amy, you're here. A small figure ran over. It was Jessica. Yes, I brought Father over to make delicious barbecue for everyone. Amy nodded. Hello, Uncle Meg. Jessica looked at Meg and greeted him. Jessica, did you make an appointment with Amy to come over to play today? Meg said with a smile. Jessica nodded. Yes, I haven't seen my friends for a while. Sister Anne. Jessica went up and hugged and again. After playing together for a day, they had become good friends. The children who were playing in the courtyard stopped and looked timidly at Meg and the others standing at the door. When they saw Amy and Anne, there was surprise and envy in their eyes. It's Amy. I haven't seen her in a long time. Yes, her little dress is so pretty. She's become prettier too. I remember that uncle. He's Amy's father. He brought us delicious food last time. Then, is he sending us delicious food again this time? The children discussed in hushed voices as their gazes fell on the grill and a large box. Many of the children who had tasted Meg's braised chicken couldn't help but salivate. Xiaomi, you guys go play with the children first. I'll go talk to the staff first, Meg said with a smile as he looked at the 2 staff members who were walking towards him. Okay. Amy nodded obediently and held Anne's hand as they walked toward the children. Hello, who are you? The staff member stepped forward and looked at Meg warily as he asked. He sized up the oven and big box beside him. Hello, I'm Meg, the owner of Immerse. I took the liberty of coming here today to make some food for the children, Meg said with a smile. We provide 3 meals for the children here, and the children have already had their lunch. Thank you for your kindness, but this is not in accordance with the rules of the Welfare Institute. Please leave. The middle-aged female staff member refused with a firm expression, without any intention of negotiating. Meg wasn't angry upon hearing this. This meant that the rules of the orphanage were very well enforced, and the staff members were very responsible. Immerse? Could it be that Immerse from the Aiden Square? The young staff member looked at Meg with a surprised expression. Yes. Meg nodded. The young staff member whispered a few words into the middle-aged staff member's ear. He then looked at Meg with a smile and said, Please wait for a moment, I'll go get the president. We can't make the decision on this matter. All right. Meg nodded and looked on as the young staff member left. The middle-aged staff member looked at Amy and Anne, who were already playing with the children, and a smile appeared on his face. He turned to Meg and asked, Are those your children? Yes, both of them. Meg nodded with a smile. What a kind child, the staff member praised from the bottom of his heart. From the clothes and temperament of Meg and the 2 children, it could be seen that they were rich. During this period of time, kind-hearted people often came to visit the children, but there was a clear gap between the children of the rich and the children in the orphanage, and it was very difficult for them to play together. Meg smiled as he looked at Amy, who was playing with the children. Who knew that she used to be one of them? He would never allow something like this to happen again. Hello, Mr. Mag. I am the director of the orphanage, Anne Lin. Teacher Luna often mentions you to me. At this moment, a capable middle-aged man walked quickly to Mag and excitedly said, "Hello, Mr. Mag. I am Anne Lin, the director of the orphanage. Teacher Luna often mentions you to me." "Hello, Director. I came over with the children today to make some snacks for the children and play with them for a while. I wonder if that's possible." Meg also smiled at Anne Lin. Anne Lin nodded with a smile and said, "Of course. You are an important investor of the foundation. You have made a very important contribution for the children to be able to stay here. Furthermore, the children should also be very eager to try the culinary skills of the best chef in Chaos City. You flatter me. I just did something that was within my ability." Meg quickly shook his head. It seemed like Luna had made a good impression on him outside. When the middle-aged staff member heard Annelin's words, the way he looked at Meg changed a little. Anne Lin came to the middle of the yard, and loudly said with a smile, "Children, this is Mr. Meg. He is a very capable chef. He is going to cook for everyone later. Are you happy?" "Really?" "Yes. I've eaten the food cooked by this uncle. It's super delicious." The children immediately nodded happily. Some of the children who had eaten the food cooked by Meg before were even more excited. "Everyone, have fun first. I'll call everyone over when it's ready," Meg also said with a smile. He set up the 2 barbecue racks, and then set up the ice cream machine. "Let us help too. If there's anything we can help with, just let us know." The middle-aged staff member from before came forward with a few female staff members, and said to Meg, "The ingredients have been prepared in advance, but I'll need your help to distribute the food to the children later," Meg said. "Okay." The staff member withdrew his hand that was reaching for the ingredients. Meg lit up the charcoal fire on the 2 barbecue racks. Considering that the children had just had lunch, the charcoal fire burned slowly for half an hour. Then, he opened the safety food box, took out 2 large handfuls of beef kebabs and mutton kebabs, put them on the barbecue rack, and then started to roast them skillfully. There were hundreds of meat kebabs, and each hand held a large handful. However, in Meg's hands, they were flipped up and down. When they were scattered, it was like a fairy scattering flowers. The sparks on the barbecue rack blossomed in an amazing arc. Wow! Amazing! The children and staff present were a little stunned. Such exquisite craftsmanship was like a gorgeous performance. With the heat, the mutton kebabs and beef kebabs began to emit oil, and the fragrance also spread. When the sauce was brushed, the whole place was filled with the sound of saliva swallowing. Chapter 1986. The aroma of barbecued meat wafted through the air, wafting through the courtyard on this winter day. The rich aroma of meat mixed with the aroma of spices was irresistible. Gulp gulp, the children stopped playing and gathered around Meg. They couldn't help but salivate at the sight of the sizzling barbecue skewers in his hands. "This is way too fragrant. Why is the aroma of the meat so alluring? It's different from all the meat I've ever eaten. Even though I ate 3 bowls of rice at noon, I feel like I can eat again now." The children were completely immersed in the aroma of the barbecued meat. As expected of the legendary Mr. Mac. Just the aroma alone is irresistible. Anne Lin wiped the tears from the corners of her mouth and sighed with emotion. The expressions of the workers weren't any better than the children's. Several of the little girls were already looking at Meg with stars in their eyes. This young and handsome boss also had amazing culinary skills. He was simply too outstanding. "I knew everyone would like it," Amy whispered with a smile on her face. "No one can refuse Uncle Meg's cooking." Jessica nodded in agreement. Meg walked between the 2 grills. A lamb kebab and a beef kebab were almost finished at the same time. They were placed on 2 long metal plates. please distribute them to the children. Each child will get a beef kebab and a lamb kebab. Meg looked at the workers standing nearby with a smile. All right. The middle-aged woman nodded and yelled, "Children, line up, just like when you're eating. Come up one by one to get your skewers." The children, who had been huddled together, immediately lined up into 6 lines. The workers began to distribute the barbecued meat skewers to the children. Meg smiled and continued to barbecue for the children. He left the distribution to the workers so that he could cook better. Oh! This beef kebab is so delicious. This is the first time I've eaten beef kebab. It's so delicious. Ah! I bit my tongue. It's so delicious. Lamb is so cute. It's even more delicious when barbecued. I'm going to cry. It's so delicious. The children had already fallen in love with the barbecued meat. The orphanage allowed them to fill their stomachs for 3 meals, and they were often able to eat meat that they didn't even dare to imagine before. However, the children had never eaten such delicious food. The delicious barbecued meat subverted all their imaginations of food. Even in their dreams, such delicacies had never appeared. Innocent smiles on the children's faces. It was a happiness that was rarely seen on their faces. At least they're happy at this moment. As the person in charge of this orphanage, he had some understanding of every child. The children of the children of the children of's, SSSSSS, and theirs, like a hedgehog. The world, they guarded theirs. Calm. The children. 2. TT. More than 500 children quickly ate the freshly baked beef kebabs and mutton kebabs. The meat on the skewers was not small. Although there were only 2 skewers, it was still a lot for the children. Although they were not satisfied, the children's smiles were quite satisfied. Meg gave the last skewers to the staff as a way of thanking them for their help. After several rejections, the staff still accepted Meg's kindness. Skewers of barbecued meat were distributed from their hands. Listening to the children's praises, they were already overflowing with saliva. But when they really ate the freshly baked barbecued meat, all their thoughts were satisfied. The translucent fat meat was inlaid on the beef like small crystals. The sauce was brushed very fine and evenly. The surface of the barbecued meat was faintly oily, looking very delicate. When the beef entered their mouths, the slightly charred skin and the garlic-scented sauce melted in their mouths first. The garlic, which usually felt pungent, was particularly soft and delicious at this moment, making them salivate. Chewing carefully, the fresh beef immediately collapsed in their mouths. The aroma of garlic and meat wafted out from the meat, and the delicious taste bloomed in their mouths instantly. They could feel their taste buds cheering with every bite, making them unable to stop. This is a crime. It's too delicious. Annelyn sniffed, her emotions a little out of control. Mr. Meg. At this moment, a surprised voice sounded from behind Meg. Meg turned around and saw Luna and Vivian walking in from the door. He smiled and said, "Teacher Luna, Miss Vivian." "Teacher Luna." Amy trotted forward and looked up at Luna. "Little Amy." Luna smiled and stroked Amy's hair. She looked at the unfinished barbecued meat skewers in the children's hands and the 2 grills in front of Meg. Then she looked at Meg and said, "Looks like you made delicious barbecued meat skewers for the children." TSK, it's a pity that we came late and didn't even get to eat a single skewer," Vivian said regretfully as she glanced at the empty ingredients box. "Teacher Luna, this uncle's barbecued meat skewers are super delicious." Yes, it's really delicious." When the children saw Luna, happy smiles appeared on their faces, and they didn't forget to praise Meg. "Amy said she wanted to see her friends, so I brought her here and made some barbecued meat skewers for the children." Meg nodded and took an ice cream from the ice cream machine beside him and handed it to Vivian. The barbecued meat skewers have just been distributed, but there's still some ice cream. Thank you, Mr. Mack. Vivian was as happy as a child. She reached out to take the ice cream from Meg's hand and licked it, and her smile became even more radiant. Meanwhile, the children's gazes fell on Vivian's ice cream, and they began to wonder what this beautiful big sister was licking so happily. The children haven't been so happy in a long time. Mr. Meg's culinary skills are really amazing. Aneurin walked over and looked at Meg with admiration. You flatter me. Meg felt that his gaze was a little gay, and he subconsciously leaned toward Luna. He continued, I didn't prepare a lot of barbecued meat skewers, but I also prepared ice cream for the children. Since everyone is here now, let's distribute the ice cream to the children first. Okay, we'll help too. Luna nodded. Meg switched on the ice cream machine, and began to distribute the ice cream to the children after choosing any of the 4 flavors. Chapter 1987. Vivian stood beside Luna, and looked at Meg, who was cleaning up the grill, as she whispered, Mr. Mack really is a good man. Are you sure you don't want to work harder to get your hands on him? Shoo, don't spout nonsense. Luna blushed as she glared at Vivian. Look at how caring he is, and he's so supportive of your work. He's so nice to the children, and he's not as clingy as those young kids. He's perfect for your criteria. Vivian was still unwilling to give up. Luna looked at the children who were happily eating ice cream. She rarely saw such innocent smiles on their faces, and all of this was brought to them by Mr. Meg. Furthermore, if it weren't for Mr. Meg's support, these children would still be homeless on the streets. Luna made her way over to Meg, and said in a gentle voice, Thank you, Mr. Meg. I'm just doing a small favor for the children. Meg set down the things he was cooking, and looked at Luna with a smile as he shook his head. He paused momentarily before continuing, the situation has been a little chaotic recently. Are you going back to Rodu, Teacher Luna? Luna shook her head. No, I have to be present for many of the Foundation's matters. I'll be more useful in Chaos City than in Rodu. Her parents had already written her many letters to urge her to return to Rodu, and they had even sent her brother to come to Rodu to take her back, but she had already decided to stay. War wasn't something that she could decide. Perhaps it would be safer for her to return to Rodu, but if she were to leave, many of the Foundation's projects would be suspended. Hope School was under construction, and the recruitment of teachers was also progressing rapidly. A batch of retired teachers had been hired, and the recruitment of new teachers was progressing at a much faster pace. At the same time, she and the City Lord's castle were also checking the enrollment status of the children of suitable age, so that those who couldn't study in Chaos School could enroll in Hope School. If she were to return to Rodu, she would just be a young mistress with nothing to do at home, but in Chaos City, she carried the hopes of many children on her shoulders. If there's anything you need help with, just let me know. I'll do my best to help. Meg nodded. As the young mistress of the Roth Empire, she had come to Chaos City to do poverty alleviation education. She had chosen to stay in such a turbulent time. Her spirit was admirable. All right. Luna smiled. For some reason, when these words came from Mr. Meg's mouth, she felt at ease and wanted to rely on him. After that, Luna chatted with Mag about Hope School for a while. Meg could feel that Luna had invested a lot of effort and hope in this school. Compared to Chaos School, which could barely enroll a few hundred students, Hope School was the real solution to solve the problem of children at the bottom of the social ladder. Mr. Mack, I've become a teacher at Hope School. You can call me Teacher Vivian from now on, Vivian said to Meg as she stepped forward. Congratulations, Teacher Vivian. Meg smiled. He knew that Vivian was going to become a teacher at Chaos School, but he didn't expect her to go there instead. "Thank you. I'll go and have a grilled fish tonight to celebrate." Vivian had a smug smile on her face. She had just received the acceptance notice from Luna, and it had been interviewed by the old teachers. It had nothing to do with Luna at all. The children were having fun, and Meg wasn't in a hurry to call them home. However, he was a little bored at the orphanage, so he took some time to go to the brewery, which was also located in the north of the city. He had just entered the factory when the roaring of the machines could be heard. Such a huge brewery naturally couldn't be used as Hannah's private workshop. The 100 elves that were transferred from the night elves were already assigned to various posts in the brewery. The elf guard at the entrance knew Mag, so he let him enter the factory directly. "We need to make wine scientifically. The idea of making wine based on experience is outdated. Only by making wine according to scientific methods and ensuring the standardization of every step can we ensure that every bottle of wine that leaves the factory has the same excellent quality. This is the so-called quality control. I've already researched 3 sets of brewing recipes for different flavors of rum these few days." Meg heard Hannah's voice from inside the brewery just as he walked to the door of the brewery. Meg slowly retracted his footsteps and listened at the door with a strange expression. He didn't expect Hannah to be so good as a factory manager just by taking a few business management books from him. Meg didn't disturb Hannah's work and walked around the factory. The blueprints of this factory were made by the system, and it was done according to the advanced planning of modern breweries. It was just that the exterior of the building used the popular style of this world, and it had a little of the feel of a European-style winery. "Boss, why are you here?" Not long after, Hannah's voice sounded from behind Meg. She quickly walked up. "I heard they said you were here. Why didn't you come and find me directly?" "I heard that factory manager Hannah was teaching the concept of scientific development. I didn't dare to disturb you, so I just walked around by myself." Meg turned around and smiled at Hannah, who was wearing a blue uniform. "Hee, I just memorized a few paragraphs from the book, but it seems like the effect is quite good. They look at me differently now." Hannah smiled a little embarrassedly. Meg knew that Hannah had the talent to manage this factory, so he asked, "How is the operation of the machine? When can we start mass-producing it?" "This machine is super easy to use. The output is super stable. I only used a day to understand it. It's so much better than the pile of junk I had before." Hannah didn't hide her love for the new machine. "I have already debugged a few of my and my grandpa's rum recipes. The quality of the finished products brewed by the new machine is better, and it can guarantee the quality. The rate of spoilage is very low. But to be safe, I will continue to debug and experiment these 2 days. As long as the quality of today's rum is stable, then starting tomorrow, we can officially start mass-producing rum and mass-producing rum." "Okay, then I will wait for your good news." Meg nodded. He was very satisfied with Hannah's efficiency. "Boss, wait a moment." Hannah turned around and went into the wine cellar. Not long after, she came out with 2 jars of rum. "This is what I brewed yesterday. Take it back and try it. It is mixed with base liquor. It can be considered as a 3-year-old rum." Hannah handed the jars to Meg and said, "Okay, then I will go back and try it." Meg took the jars. He really wanted to test if the rum brewed by Hannah with the new machine maintained a high standard. But there were many customers who were still thinking about the rum. Meg was also waiting for Hannah to mass produce and give the customers another choice. Speaking of which, his Mao Tai and whiskey hadn't been brewed for the customers to try. "I have to work overtime tonight," Meg thought in his heart. Chapter 1988. "Lord Bishop, this is the address of the little girl you're looking for." It's located in the southwest corner of the Aden Square. This restaurant is very popular, so it's very easy to find. A young preacher looked at the white-haired bishop and hesitantly said, however, this little girl's identity is a little special. She's the disciple of the legendary magic casters Crassus and Julian. I'm already aware of this. Bishop Seely nodded slightly. I'm here on the Pope's orders. There's no need to be wary of anyone. Furthermore, this little girl is very important to our church. I won't hurt her. All right, then I'll bring you to visit her tonight. That young preacher heaved a sigh of relief, and a relaxed smile appeared on his face. He glanced at the time and said, "Why don't I bring you there now? You can have dinner at Mamie's." "All right." Seely nodded. As the Archbishop of the Church, Seely came to Chaos City from Rhodu on the Pope's orders. His goal was to find the goddess, and bring her back to the Holy See as soon as possible. Of course, the Pope had already told him about the goddess' special identity before he came. As the disciple of Crassus and Julian, and the youngest champion of the Magic Casters tournament, this goddess was only 4 years old, but had already displayed unimaginable power, and a background that even the Holy See had to be wary of. Both Crassus and Urian were lunatics. The only difference was that Crassus was a member of the Magus Tower, so he had to restrain himself a little. Urian, on the other hand, had always been carefree. It was impossible to use the Holy See to suppress them. However, God had already given his orders. The world was going to be in chaos, and the Holy See needed the goddess to save this world that was going to be overturned at any time. Is God right to place his hopes on a 4-year-old child this time? Although it was a little disrespectful, Seely couldn't help but think to himself. Kano was the person in charge of the Holy See in Chaos City. He was a young preacher, but he had grown up in the Holy See, and was already a preacher who could hold his own. The Holy See was gradually declining in the Roth Empire, and gradually lost its presence outside the Roth Empire. The Holy See branch in Chaos City actually only had a small church. There were only 3 people from the Holy See, including Kano. They were mainly responsible for the daily prayers and series of work for the small number of believers. Kano had already been in Chaos City for 3 years, and this was the first time he saw someone sent by the Holy See. What was even more unexpected was that the person who came was actually the bishop. One had to know that a bishop's status in the Holy See was only second to the Pope. Even in the Roth Empire, they were extremely respected. However, he was willing to travel all the way from Rhodu to Chaos City for a little girl. As a regular who would occasionally go to Mamie's for a sumptuous meal, he had some understanding of the little boss who was the favorite of the group. This made him even more puzzled as to how this little girl was connected to the Pope and the Holy See. However, as an outcast, Kano still wanted to perform better in front of the bishop even though he was doing well in Chaos City. Perhaps he would have a chance to be transferred back to Rhodu. "Lord Bishop, this Mamie's is our destination." The restaurant's owner, Mr. Meg. Kano brought Seely to the entrance of Mamie's. It was already lunchtime, and there was already a long line at the entrance. His identity as a bishop of the Holy See was not very useful here. Luckily, Seely did not have the disease of a powerhouse. He followed Kano to the back of the line, and listened to him talk about some of the interesting stories and rules of this restaurant. Right at this moment, the restaurant's door was pushed open a crack. A round orange cat squeezed out from the crack, followed by a little half-elf girl with twin ponytails. "It's her." Seely's eyes lit up instantly. This little girl looked as delicate and lovely as a jade sculpture. She was so small, but she was already emitting a frightening magic aura. The news was right. This little girl's magic aura was already not lower than the 7th tier. A 4-year-old high-level magic caster was an unprecedented existence on the Norland continent. Furthermore, Seely could also sense a familiar trace of divine power on her. This was the energy unique to the Holy Sea's unique cultivation system. She is indeed the goddess chosen by the gods. She is indeed extraordinary, Seely praised softly. Yes. Not only is she cute, but she is also so outstanding. She simply does not give ordinary people a chance to survive. Kano nodded in agreement. Little Amy's hair is tied up so beautifully today, a young and beautiful girl praised. Father tied it up for me. Isn't it beautiful? Amy fiddled with her ponytail. It's really beautiful. I wonder if I can ask Mr. Mac to tie one up for me too. The girl said with a blush. Amy stared at her for a while, and shook her head seriously. Little big sister, you are very beautiful. Don't think too highly of yourself. That girl covered her mouth and giggled. Although she was rejected, she was in a very good mood. Little boss, what about me? Harrison chimed in. You are an adult. You have to be more mature, Amy said as she looked at him. Little boss, you have double standards. Harrison was a little aggrieved. I'm not going to chat with you guys anymore. I have to go for a walk with the cat. Amy kicked Ugly Duckling, who was lying down at the door, lightly, and scolded softly, hurry up and get moving. Run one lap around the Aiden Square before you eat. You are not allowed to eat until you finish running. O equals intersection omega intersection, smiley face O. Ugly Duckling turned around with a surprised expression. Good food is only good if the fat and lean are evenly distributed. Good duck, hurry up and get moving. I will be watching you from behind. Amy's expression was very serious, and did not take no for an answer. Meow, meow, although Ugly Duckling was unwilling, it still got up and walked into the square under Amy's gaze. It ran quickly, and then jumped onto a tree. It climbed up the treetop in a few steps, and then jumped onto another tree easily. After that, it started to jump between the treetops. It's so cold. The restaurant is still warmer. Amy stood at the door for 3 seconds before she turned around and went back into the restaurant. She closed the door on her way back, leaving the customers looking at each other in bewilderment. Didn't little boss say she was going for a walk with the cat just now? She also told Ugly Duckling that she would watch it, but she only did it for 3 seconds, she's a little two-faced. I like it. The customers laughed as they discussed. This little episode made waiting in line a lot more interesting. The little girl is quite popular, Healy said with a smile. Yes, little boss is very popular with the customers. She is cute, and the way she talks is interesting. Moreover, she would teach some customers who do not follow the rules a lesson from time to time. She has become the guardian angel of Mamis. Kano nodded with a smile. Seems like you know this restaurant quite well. Do you come here often? Healy turned around and looked at Kano. I come here occasionally. Kano looked embarrassed. Mamis was not a restaurant that he could frequent. Chapter 1989. Kano did come to Mamis to eat occasionally, but only twice a day. He was busy with the church's work in the morning, so he couldn't come to the restaurant early in the morning to line up, so he could only make do by himself. As a missionary driven by interest, he would have to go home and inherit his family fortune if he didn't become a missionary, so he preferred to live a carefree life. Chaos City was pretty good. He could go home to visit when he missed home, and stay away when he was not. He was carefree, and happy. Everything was good in Chaos City, but to a foodie who was picky with his food in Rodu, the biggest torture here was not being able to eat good food. This was also one of the main reasons why he wavered and hesitated on whether to go home and inherit his family fortune. And Mamie's appearance was like a ray of light in Kano's world. giving him a sufficient reason to stay. Mr. Mac was really too awesome. As a man who had eaten in all the restaurants in Rodu, Kano also believed that Mr. Mac was the most awesome. In his heart, no restaurant could be compared to Mamie's, and no restaurant could let him eat for a few months without getting sick of it. Furthermore, he would receive a new surprise every once in a while. Even a pig would develop feelings after being raised for a long time, let alone a foodie who had been fed for a few months. Hence, when the Holy See sent out the Archbishop and asked specifically for Little Boss, Kano was still a little worried. However, the Holy See was not some evil organization, and the Pope was obviously a kind old man. But for the Archbishop to come all the way to Chaos City to look for Little Boss, it was a little surprising. The Hill didn't show too much interest in Kano's life. This person in charge of the Holy See in Chaos City was very capable, but he was too lazy, and didn't like to manage the Holy See's affairs. Hence, he took the initiative to apply for a transfer to Chaos City. Kano was afraid that the Hill would be bored waiting in line, so he introduced many interesting things about Mamie's to him at the side. The Hill also listened very seriously, especially the parts about Amy, and even raised some questions occasionally. Does this restaurant always have so many customers? After waiting in line for an hour, Healy, who still hadn't had his turn to enter, finally couldn't help but ask. That's right. Amy's is the restaurant with the best business in Chaos City. However, the queue is very fair, and the atmosphere is very good, so the customers are all willing to wait in line. Kano nodded. He glanced at the remaining 3 guests in front of him and said with a smile, "Don't worry, it'll be our turn very soon." While they were talking, a few guests walked out of the restaurant, chatting and laughing. The guests in front of them entered the restaurant. "You can go in now," Kano hurriedly said as he walked into the restaurant with Seely. As soon as they entered the restaurant, the cold was isolated outside the door. There were hundreds of guests sitting in the beautifully decorated hall, but the expected noise did not appear. What surprised Seely even more was the guests sitting together. Elves and demons sat at the same table, humans and orcs sat opposite each other, chatting and laughing. Dwarves and goblins raised their wine glasses and clinked them, looking very harmonious and friendly. If he didn't know clearly what had happened in the history of the Norland continent, he would even think that times had changed. There are empty seats here, but we need to share a table with those 2 guests. Kano found 2 empty seats by the window. They were left empty after the previous guests left, but there were still 2 burly orcs sitting at the table. "Is it okay?" Seely glanced at those 2 orcs with a slight frown. Kano knew what Seely was worried about. He smiled and said, "It's okay. This is Amy's tradition and rule. All the customers who enter Amy's have to abide by it." Seely naturally had no reason to be afraid of those 2 orcs. He just didn't want to cause a conflict with others in the restaurant and bring trouble to the boss. The 2 of them sat down at the empty seats that had already been cleaned up. That orc who downed a huge mug of beer looked up and burped. He turned his head to look at Seely and Kano, and gave them a friendly smile. Seely nodded slightly, feeling a little uncomfortable. "You 2 are the preachers of the Holy See from the Roth Empire, right?" That orc sitting beside Kano also looked at the 2 of them curiously. Although the Holy See had been trying to expand its influence all these years, it was declining even in the Roth Empire, let alone expand. The fact that there were only 5 staff members in the church in Chaos City was enough to explain everything. "Yes, we are preachers." Kano nodded with a smile. "I heard that the Roth Empire had just launched a sneak attack on us orcs, and massacred many tribes. Is that true?" That orc asked again with obvious hostility in his expression. Seely had already heard about this from the Pope. The Roth Empire had launched an attack on the orcs without a valid reason, and had even massacred many tribes cruelly. It was wrong no matter what, so he hesitated on how to answer this question. What are you talking about? Is this something that these two preacher friends can influence and decide? They probably don't know what exactly happened, just like us. That orc sitting opposite him patted him on the shoulder before smiling at Seely. I'm sorry. This brother of mine is a little hot-tempered, but he doesn't mean any hostility. It's all right. If this matter is really as he said, the Roth Empire and us should be the ones apologizing. Seely shook his head. He was surprised that this orc was so understanding, and also expressed his attitude towards this war. What's so good about war? I think that Roth Empire's king must be out of his mind, that orc mumbled as he finished his beer in one gulp, and kept quiet. What would you like to order? Yabamiya came to Kanua's table with a smile. Miss Mia, we would like a roast goose, a serving of red braised pork, a serving of eggplant with garlic sauce, a serving of mapo tofu, a serving of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, and a refill of iced beer for these two gentlemen, Kanua said skillfully. Thank you, little brother, that orc said to Kanua with a smile. You're welcome. Kanua also shook his head with a smile. Seely glanced at Kanua, and was surprised by his skillfulness. However, Seely's gaze was quickly attracted by Amy, who was playing with the cat behind the counter. It's the aura of God, and it's already quite rich. This young lady is indeed not ordinary. Seely observed Amy. The Pope said that he had once given her the wings of God, but she hid the powers of God very well. If it wasn't for the Holy See's higher-ups, they probably wouldn't be able to tell. At such a young age, she could actually resist the urge to summon the wings of God to play with it. This young lady's self-control also surprised him. Not long after, dishes were served on the table and placed in front of Seely and Kanua. Meanwhile, Seely's gaze was also quickly attracted by the delicacies in front of him, and he retracted his gaze from Amy. It smells so good. Seely's nose twitched, and he couldn't help but think in his heart. Chapter 1990. As a highly respected Archbishop of the Holy See, Seely's desire for good food had long faded. Living a pure and simple life had become a habit, but in front of the dishes on the table, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. This thing that had been cut into countless pieces but still maintained the shape of a goose was roast goose. The rich aroma of the braised food made one restless. The large fish head on the plate was covered with red and green chopped peppers. The spicy and fresh aroma had already hit him in the face. Although he was surprised that someone would eat the fish head alone, it didn't affect his impulse to try it. The red meat in the ceramic bowl was pork with fat and lean meat. This kind of meat with more fat was usually too fatty in Seely's eyes, but the chef had used some unknown method to dye this fatty meat with a layer of bright red color. The rich aroma of the meat was so pure that it was irresistible. There was no mapo in the mapo tofu, which made Seely feel relieved. However, there was no fish in the eggplant with garlic sauce, which made him feel a little cheated. Have a taste. These are all very popular dishes from Mamis. Kano looked at Seely with respect. As a marginal member of the Holy See, there weren't many opportunities to have dinner with an archbishop at the same table. Seely nodded slightly. He picked up a piece of roast goose with his chopsticks and put it into his mouth. Crunch. A slight sound could be heard as the crispy goose skin was bitten. Under the skin was the fresh and tender goose meat soaked in the gravy. With a bite, the gravy splattered in his mouth. His taste buds were instantly activated and began to welcome the delicious feverish storm. Roast goose, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, mapo tofu. Seely gradually immersed himself in the delicious food, unable to extricate himself. He almost couldn't imagine that someone could cook such delicious food. This was originally meant to fill the stomach and replenish energy, but it had become a kind of enjoyment. As an experienced person, Kano smiled as he watched Seely eat heartily. This was similar to when he first discovered Mamis. After a long time, the dishes in front of them were all finished. Only then did they let out a burp and stopped eating. I didn't expect to finish it all. Seely looked at the empty plate in front of him and thought in surprise. When these dishes were first served, he was a little worried that it would be a waste if he couldn't finish them. Are you satisfied with the food? Kano looked at Seely a little nervously and asked. Yes, very good. Seely nodded and glanced at the waiters in the restaurant. He was a little surprised. The waiters in this restaurant are a little special. A pure-blooded golden dragon, a pure-blooded frost dragon, a space great magician of an unknown race, an 8th-tier magician of an unknown race, and a 7th-tier elf. It was hard to imagine that this was the strength of a waiter in a restaurant. Yeah, the waitresses at Mamis are all very pretty. Kano nodded in agreement. Healy glanced at Kano. I mean, Mr. Mack has great taste, Kano explained awkwardly. There's still more than an hour before the restaurant closes for business. Why don't we go out for a walk first? Kano suggested to ease his embarrassment. All right. Seely glanced at Meg, who was busy in the kitchen. If he wanted to take Amy away, he had to get Meg's permission first. That way, they could also avoid conflict between Crassus and Julian. An archbishop from the Holy See. What are they here for? In the kitchen, Meg looked up at Kano and Seely, who were about to pay the bill and leave. It was not difficult to determine their identities from their clothes. Ever since he met the Pope in Rodu and Amy was given that pair of invisible wings, Meg had spent a lot of time collecting information related to the Holy See. This white-haired old priest should be Archbishop Seely, the second-in-command in the Holy See, who was second only to the Pope. With the Archbishop's status, he shouldn't appear in Chaos City, let alone specially line up to eat at Mamis. Could he be here for Amy? Meg frowned. The Holy See had existed among the humans for a very long time. Before the Roth Empire was established, it was even the beacon of light for the humans during the Dark Age. It was the symbol of light and justice. After the Roth Empire was established, the royal family intentionally weakened the Holy See's influence in order to truly control the power, causing the Holy See to decline day by day. However, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The Holy See still had a strong foundation in the Roth Empire, and even had several 10th-tier powerhouses. From all the information, the Holy See had a very positive image in the history of the humans. However, what Meg could not understand was why the Pope thought that Amy was a goddess chosen by God. The Holy See was the Holy See of the humans, and Amy was a half-elf. This did not make sense. As expected, when the restaurant was closed for the night, Kano brought Seely, and knocked on the restaurant's door. Mr. Meg, I am Archbishop Seely of the Holy See. I have something to discuss with you about your daughter, Amy. I wonder if it's possible, Seely said to Meg. Meg looked at Seely. After pondering for a while, he still opened the door, and said, Come in. Father, who are they? Amy was about to go upstairs with Ugly Duckling in her arms when she saw Seely and Kano come in, and asked curiously. They have something to discuss with Father. Meg, you and can go upstairs first, said Meg. All right. Amy nodded, and went upstairs with Anne. What an obedient child, Seely praised as he watched Amy go upstairs. Meg poured 2 glasses of water for the two of them, and sat down opposite them. He calmly asked, May I know what brings you here today, Archbishop? Seely looked into Meg's eyes, and said, I know Mr. Meg has already met the Pope in Rodu. I came to Chaos City on the Pope's orders to bring the goddess to Rodu to receive the Holy See's conferment and baptism. Meg frowned upon hearing that. There's no goddess here. Seems like the two of you have come to the wrong place. Mr. Meg's daughter, Amy, has received the wings of God. She was chosen by God, and is also the goddess of the Holy See. Returning to the Holy See is the best choice for her. She will become the next pope, Seely said solemnly. Meg looked at her with a mocking smile, and said, You think it's true just because you say so. Then I'll say that your pope was chosen by the god of cookery, and is my Mamie's holy son. Tell him to come and serve in my restaurant. Do a good job, and he will become the next manager. You. Seely's expression turned cold. Mr. Mac. Kano, who had been standing at the side, looked at Meg with a worried expression. This Mr. Mac was too fierce. He dared to say anything. If there's nothing else, I'll see you out. Meg stood up, and looked at Seely and Kano without any reservation. Chapter 1991. Meg didn't care who that bullshit god was. He only knew that anyone who tried to take Amy away from him was not a good person. Moreover, he had never been very fond of frauds. Previously in Rodu, it was fine that Amy liked those wings, but if the Holy See wanted to use those things as a threat to make Amy go to Rodu to become some goddess, he wouldn't agree. As for the so-called Pope, Meg didn't believe that Andre would let a half-elf become the Pope and make the Roth Empire's royal family kneel at her feet for generations to ascend to the throne. Mr. Meg, we don't mean any harm. This is the Pope's handwritten letter for you. Seely also stood up, took out a letter from his spatial ring, and handed it to Meg. Meg didn't take the letter, and looked at Seely calmly as he said, I've said before that Amy is not some goddess. She's just a 4-year-old child. I hope she can grow up happily. There are no plans related to becoming the Pope here. The atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly became a little tense. Kano's gaze shifted between the two of them. He was secretly impressed that Mr. Mac, as a normal person, actually had the strong aura to go toe-to-toe with the Archbishop. At the same time, he was a little worried that the Archbishop wouldn't be able to control himself and go on a rampage. Seely looked at Meg in silence for a long time. He placed the letter in his hand on the table, and said in a low voice, I shouldn't have told you this, but you're so stubborn. This world isn't as peaceful and stable as you see it. The devil has already climbed out of the abyss, and darkness is about to descend. This world needs light, and she is the one who can bring light to this world. God has chosen her, so she has to shoulder this responsibility. Ha! Meg laughed unkindly. If this world needs saving, let your so-called gods save the world themselves. If your so-called gods only know how to hide behind and blabber, then let your so-called representatives of gods do it. Don't you think it's embarrassing and ridiculous to let a 4-year-old child save the world and put this kind of responsibility on her shoulders? Meg's smile didn't hide the mockery. Hearing that, Kano blushed and turned his face away. He didn't know why Seely came to Meg and Little Boss today. Although Little Boss was very powerful and talented, as Mr. Mac had said, it was still hard to believe that a 4-year-old child would take on the responsibility of saving the world, even if the gods had chosen her. Healy was silent. Surprisingly, he was not angry. You are a good father, and I can understand your anger. However, this matter concerns the Norland continent, so I hope you can consider it carefully. Seely turned and walked toward the door after saying that. Kano nodded apologetically at Meg before turning around and quickly catching up with Seely. There's no need to consider. Amy won't go with you. Meg looked at Seely's departing figure and calmly said, if the Norland continent has to be saved by a child, then it's over. Seely's footsteps paused for a moment, and he reached out to push the door open and walked out. Kano followed him out, and closed the door carefully again. He followed behind Seely. Although he was only a mid-tier magic caster, he could also feel Seely's anger and the unstable magic elements around him. Kano didn't expect Mr. Mac, a normal person, to have such courage in front of a great magic caster. He even rejected the opportunity to let his daughter become the future Pope of the Holy See without hesitation. Mr. Mac has always been known to dote on his daughter. Maybe he just doesn't want Amy to leave him. Kano said softly. Foolish, ignorant. Seely uttered these two words in a dull voice. Archbishop, what do you plan to do now? Kano asked carefully. He was a little worried that Seely would snatch the child away. After all, this was Chaos City, and Julian lived not far away from them. I will stay in Chaos City for a while. The Divine Lady's matter is very important. We have to bring her back to the Holy See, Seely said seriously. All right. Kano nodded. He didn't ask any more questions that shouldn't be asked at his level. Meg casually threw the letter written by the Pope into the rubbish bin. No matter what that fellow said, he couldn't send Amy to the Holy See. The Holy See might pour a lot of resources into Amy, but Amy might also become an emotionless oracle because of that. That was something he couldn't accept. Furthermore, he was already a demigod now. He was only one step away from becoming a god. The so-called gods had already lost their mystery and unattainable feeling in his eyes. If anyone dared to have designs on Amy, he would kill them even if they were a god. Meg kept the 2 cups, and was about to go and study how to brew wine when the bell rang outside the door again. Again. Meg frowned. He opened the door, and it wasn't Seely or Kano standing outside the door. It was Elizabeth, who was wearing a frosty dress. Elizabeth. Did you leave something in the restaurant? Meg looked at her, a little surprised. No, I'm here to resign and say goodbye, Elizabeth said coldly as she looked at Meg. Resign? Yes. Thank you for taking care of me during this period. I'm leaving Chaos City to look for my father. Elizabeth nodded. Meg looked at Elizabeth. He saved her from the Dragon Island. It was an accident that she started working at the restaurant, but after spending this period of time together, eating and working together every day, they definitely had some feelings for each other. Furthermore, it was still uncertain whether Rankster was still alive. He had disappeared in the place where the Great Old One was sealed, so the chances of him still being alive were not high. However, after spending this period of time together, he had some understanding of Elizabeth's character. She wouldn't change her mind easily once she had decided on something, let alone something that she had been obsessed with all this while. Have you told Mia and the rest? Meg asked. I left a letter for Mia, and nothing else. Elizabeth shook her head. I'm not good at saying goodbye. You don't have to resign. Amy's door will always be open for you. You can come back whenever you want. Everyone will miss you, Meg said to her with a smile. Elizabeth looked at Meg. That warm smile reminded her of her father again. She nodded slightly, and turned to leave. Wait a minute, Meg called out to her. He took out a silver ring from his pocket, and went forward to pass it to her. This is. Meg smiled, and said, I didn't prepare any gift. This ring was made by Amy and me a few days ago. It might not be very beautiful, but it's a little token of my appreciation. I hope you'll think of us when you see the ring. Thank you. Elizabeth put the ring on her ring finger. Then, she looked at Meg and said goodbye. She turned and walked away. A huge snowflake appeared under her feet, and she had already disappeared from the square that was shrouded in the night. System, are you sure that thing can locate the location successfully? What if it runs out of battery? Meg muttered in his heart. Host, please don't doubt the system's professionalism. It still has the basic solar charging function. This ring not only has the function of locating and tracking, but also has the function of alerting low health danger. If it weren't for the fact that the network hasn't been built yet, it would have all the functions of the little genius watch. The system's proud voice sounded. Chapter 1992. Meg wasn't a perverted stalker. The world was too chaotic, and he was just worried that it would be too dangerous for Elizabeth to be alone outside. If she were to disappear one day like her father, he wouldn't know where to find her. This ring had a positioning function, as well as a crisis alert function. The former was to locate Elizabeth when he needed to find her, while the latter was to alert him in time if Elizabeth was in danger, and he might be able to save her life. Elizabeth is gone, and the Holy See is here. Should I also close my business and bring Amy out to play for a while? Meg thought to himself as he turned to enter the restaurant. Just as Mag was about to close the door, a sharp whistle sounded, and a letter flew over from afar. It flew in through the gap in the door, and Mag caught it. Meg took a look at the grey temple seal on it, closed the door, and opened the letter. After a while, Meg put down the letter that the Grey Temple had sent overnight, and his expression changed slightly. What's wrong? Did something happen? A golden light flashed in the restaurant, and Irina, who had just returned, looked at Meg, who had a grave expression, and asked him. It's from the Grey Temple. The homes of a few ministers of the Ministry of War in Rodu were massacred, and then burned. Meg passed the letter in his hand to Irina. Irina skimmed through it and looked up at Meg. Is it the orcs' revenge? Or is Josh stirring up trouble again? Oster's house was almost robbed this time, so he shouldn't have the guts to go to Rodu to commit murder and arson. It said that the pro-war faction among the orcs is decreasing rapidly, and more people are joining Connie's peace faction. They can't even take care of themselves, and can't continue to intensify the conflict at this time. Meg said with a grave expression, and to blow things up at this time, either Andre is looking for a legitimate reason to start a war, or Josh is deliberately stirring it up. Irina put down the secret letter, and shook her head. The joint statement from the Dragons and the Peace Alliance should have been sent to Rhoda by now. I don't think Andre will continue to stir up a war at the risk of being attacked by all the other races. This is not something the Roth Empire can afford. Seems like we have to make a trip to Rodu. I plan to close the restaurant for a month, and bring Amy and Anne to Rodu to look for Josh, Meg said to Irina. In that case, can I be the lady boss again? Irina looked at Mag with a smile. The kind that manages the money. If you're willing, I don't mind opening a tavern in Rodu. Mag nodded with a smile. It's not good to hide every day with a child. It's better to have a legitimate identity. I think it's okay. All right, then we'll set off tomorrow. I'll pack up and prepare. Meg nodded. He already had a rough plan for the trip to Rodu in his mind. Ding! An unexpected incident has triggered a hidden mission. Open a famous tavern. Host, please open a tavern in Rodu that is renowned among the drinkers and become the most renowned tavern in Rodu. Mission prerequisite reward. A secret recipe for drunkard's peanut and a recipe for pig's ear salad have been released. As the mission progresses, more mission rewards will be released. Congratulations, host, for taking the first step in expanding the restaurant. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly appeared in Meg's mind. Looking at the two shiny recipe experience bags in his mind, Meg was slightly stunned. System, you've changed. You've actually learned to give mission rewards in advance. Very good, keep it up. Drunkard's peanut and pig's ear salad were two divine dishes that went well with alcohol. They were a perfect match for a tavern. In a tavern, selling alcohol was naturally the most important thing. Meg didn't intend to open another Immerse. He wanted to focus on alcohol so that customers would fall in love with the tavern because of the alcohol, and not because of the dishes. 2 dishes were too few. No, it was enough. Oh, yes, help me analyze the situation. In the past 2 days, there have been demonstrations and burning of slave contracts in the Wind Forest, but Helena acted out of character and didn't stop these movements. What do you think she's thinking? Irina asked Meg. Meg pondered for a moment and said, there are 2 possibilities. 1. Helena has realized that her policies and direction are wrong, and intends to turn over a new leaf and become a good person from now on, gradually reversing her policies. The second possibility is that Helena is deliberately relaxing her policies and letting all the rebellions be completely exposed. Then, she will launch a thunderous attack and completely eliminate the voices of opposition. Helena is obviously not someone who can change after realizing her mistakes. I understand this old woman's stubbornness very well. She will never admit that she is wrong. Irina shook her head and frowned slightly. Then, she will most likely start to settle scores with those who participated in this movement after the popularity of this movement dies down. What she does is actually not important. What's important is what the night elves are doing. In this turbulent time, when most of the elves are starting to side with the night elves emotionally, the most important thing is to let the night elves expand quickly and even take the opportunity to overturn Helena's ruling system, Meg said. Irina was deep in thought. She turned and walked towards the stairs as she said, I'm going to write a letter. Meg wasn't in a hurry to go upstairs. He also had a lot of things to do tonight. Immerse was closed for a month. This was unprecedented since the opening of the restaurant. The customers would definitely be furious. He also had to consider how to arrange for the employees' leave. Reina's Mana Hot Pot restaurant had become the favorite of many hot pot lovers. It could replace the customers' needs for hot pot. Mia's ice cream shop had become another children's playground. Now that Immerse was closed, the ice cream shop could operate all day. Meg planned to give the employees a long holiday during the closure period. Of course, if they had nowhere to go, they could stay at the ice cream shop or Mana Hot Pot restaurant to help out. The restaurant was closed, but it couldn't be completely sealed. After all, this was the only teleportation portal that connected the Moon Nation to the Norland continent. Meg planned to give Barbara and Yabamiya a bunch of keys each. Firstly, it would be convenient for the people from the Moon Nation to come and go. Secondly, they could enter the restaurant if there was an emergency. Immerse now had a 9th-tier defense ability. Normal attacks wouldn't be a threat to the people in the restaurant at all. Meg took out the bulletin board from behind the counter, and wrote a closure notice. The reason was very legitimate. Children are on holiday. Bring the children out to play and collect materials. Return in a month. After that, Meg took a photo stone and went into the kitchen. The next morning, before the customers came to line up, Meg hung the bulletin board on the door. After that, Meg hung a huge screen at the door and started to play cooking tutorials. Chapter 1993. Meg wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he made a scrumptious breakfast, and only announced the 1-month closure when everyone had arrived. Of course, everyone had already seen the news before they entered the restaurant. Boss, is the ice cream shop still open? Yabamiya's eyes were a little red. Clearly, she didn't sleep well after receiving Elizabeth's letter last night. The 1-month closure is also a 1-month holiday for everyone. Everyone can go home or go out to play. It's up to you, Mia, to decide whether the ice cream shop will be open or not, Meg said with a smile. Then, I'll go home for a month. Coincidentally, I have something to settle at home. Camilla stretched lazily. When she thought about how she didn't have to wake up early every day to chop vegetables, and could finally sleep in for a period of time, she felt very happy. I've been busy saving the world recently. It's good that I don't have to run around. Barbara nodded. The City Lord's castle had been looking for her to discuss spell formations recently. As the Moon Nation's #1 contact, she was also worried sick about this world. Jane hesitated for a while, but still didn't say anything. Then, I'll keep the ice cream shop open. The children like it. Those sisters who are not busy can come and help out in the shop, Yabamiya said with a smile. She looked at Jane and said, Jane, come and help out in the ice cream shop. Jane nodded with a smile. Anna and I can help out in the ice cream shop too, Shirley said. Me too. Gina raised her hand with a gentle smile. The children seem to like me. I'll go over when I'm free, Angela said with a smile. She had already made a plan in the past month. Her research had already ended, and she had to start interacting with the succubi in Chaos City officially. What about me? Hannah asked as she chewed on a deep-fried dough stick. I'll give you a month. When I come back, I hope the brewery's rum will be ready for sale, Meg said to her with a smile. I'm talking about eating. Hannah stopped chewing the deep-fried dough stick and blinked. Deal with it yourself. Meg took out a purse and pushed it in front of Hannah. Sigh. It's so hard not to eat soy milk and youtiao for a month. Hannah sighed and continued to chew on the youtiao. By the way, where's big sister Elizabeth? Phyllis asked as she looked around. Yeah, I haven't seen her since the beginning, Gina asked. Elizabeth has started her vacation ahead of time, Meg said with a smile. It seems that she has received advance notice, Camilla said. Everyone was deep in thought. They thought that Elizabeth was taking an early leave because she had something to do, so they didn't ask any more questions. Yabamiya looked at Meg in surprise. After breakfast, everyone said their goodbyes and left. Meg gave the keys to the restaurant to Barbara and Mia. Goodbye, big sisters. I'll miss you. Amy stood at the door and waved goodbye to everyone. Boss, did she say goodbye to you before she left? Yabamiya stayed until the end and asked Meg. Yes, she came to resign, but I didn't agree. I left a spot open for her. She can come back anytime. Meg nodded and patted Yabamiya's head. He smiled and said, Don't worry. She's just going to relax. People like her won't stay in one place forever. She belongs to the outside world. Yeah. Yabamiya's conflicted expression eased a lot. She smiled energetically again. She said she'll come back to visit us often. Meg smiled and said, That's right. You can manage the ice cream shop. Don't tire yourself out. Take a day off every week. Give yourself and your sisters a break. Don't worry, boss. I'll be sure to do a good job. Yabamiya nodded with a serious expression. Goodbye, Amy, Anne. Yabamiya hugged Amy and before departing. So, father, where are we going next? Amy closed the door and looked at Meg with anticipation in her eyes. Anne's expression was also filled with anticipation. She had heard many interesting stories from Amy about their last vacation and the opening of a new restaurant. We're going to Rhoda this time. Go upstairs and pack up the things that you want to take with you. After that, we'll be ready to set off, Meg said with a smile. That's great. Rhoda is so fun. I went there twice, but I still didn't get to enjoy myself. Amy was elated. She then turned and went upstairs to pack her things. And stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window for a while before turning to Meg and gesturing outside. Don't worry, Anne. The customers might not be used to it at first, but they'll find a place to eat when they're hungry. Meg made his way over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the customers who were shaking their heads and sighing as they read the notices outside. He smiled as he consoled Anne. He was still feeling a little guilty. He could completely understand the discomfort of the customers who had suddenly run out of food. However, this had happened too suddenly. In order to ensure that the customers would have a long life to eat, this trip to Rodu was unavoidable. If Josh really was in Rodu and was trying to escalate the situation and incite a large-scale war among species, then he had to stop him and kill him. Anne nodded with a thoughtful expression. Irina made her way downstairs and asked Meg, "Are we setting off now?" Meg nodded and said, "Yes. We'll have to find a venue when we get to Rodu. If everything goes well, we'll be able to complete all the preparations by today." Meow, Ugly Duckling, who was sleeping on the counter, got up and stretched. It then rolled over and lay down on the counter again, revealing its round belly and snoring comfortably. "Ugly Duckling, are you going to leave a duck in the restaurant?" Amy asked Ugly Duckling, who was still sleeping on the counter, as she came down from upstairs. Meow. Ugly Duckling jumped up, but it missed its footing and was about to fall to the ground with a thud. Fortunately, Amy had quick reflexes and kicked it into the wall, successfully preventing it from falling to the ground. Ugly Duckling got up from the ground and shook its head as it called out to Amy, "Thank you so much." "You're welcome." Amy reached out and patted the cat's head. "Let's go. Come, I'll take you guys flying." Irina waved at the three of them. Golden light flashed beneath their feet, and the three of them disappeared from the restaurant. Not long after, a purple-striped griffin took off from the north of the city and flew out of the city. It picked up the four of them on a mountain outside the city, and continued north toward Rodu. Chapter 1994. Mr. Meg should be closed for business by now, right? I don't know if I'll disturb him if I go over now. Gloria thought to herself as she closed her eyes to rest in the carriage. Her beautiful face couldn't hide the tiredness she was feeling. A few days ago, Jeffrey officially announced that she was the sole heir of family Moraton and delegated her power to take over the family's affairs. Moreover, Jeffrey personally trained her and gave her all kinds of support so that she could quickly establish her authority in the family business. However, for a newbie who had just started to learn about business management in recent months, even though she tried very hard to digest all the information, she still felt like she wasn't strong enough. She didn't sleep last night and took care of some business this morning. She planned to go to Mamie's to chat with Mr. Meg for a while. Even if it was just a cup of tea with him, it might be able to calm her down a little. "Miss, we've arrived at Mamie's." The carriage stopped and the coachman's voice came from outside. "Okay." Gloria stood up and got off the carriage. "A month's leave." 3 minutes later, Gloria stood in front of the restaurant and looked at the notice hanging on the door. She was a little surprised and disappointed. Mamie Restaurant closed its doors without any warning, and it was closed for an entire month. Gloria was inexplicably disappointed. It was like a very important person had suddenly left and didn't even say goodbye to her. After standing in front of the restaurant in silence for a long time, Gloria sat on the bench outside the restaurant for a long time. About half an hour later, Gloria suddenly stood up and turned to look at Mamie's sign that was shining brightly under the sun. She had a bright smile on her face. "Mr. Meg said that life is our own. Only we can control and make decisions. Since I've chosen this path, then I'll walk it without hesitation." Gloria turned and walked to the carriage. She had regained her calm and confidence and the tiredness on her face was gone. "To the Suede factory." Gloria got on the carriage and ordered. "Sigh, what's going on?" Why is there a war in such a peaceful world? Abraham stood beside the carriage and sighed as he looked at the servants who were moving various items onto the flying mounts. A horse galloped over from afar. He's here. Abraham's eyes lit up, and he looked on with anticipation as the knight approached him from the distance. Abraham looked at the empty-handed knight and frowned. Where's the breakfast? My Lord Duke, Mamie's has closed for the day. The notice hanging on the door says that the children are on vacation, so they need to go out to play and collect materials. They will be closed for a month, the knight said nervously. There's such a thing. Abraham's eyes widened upon hearing this. He didn't think that his last breakfast after leaving Chaos City would be gone. However, Mr. Mac dotes on Little Boss the most, so there's nothing wrong with taking the children out to play during the holidays. It's just that those customers who are already addicted to Mamie's have to suffer. Abraham sighed, but he couldn't hide the smile on his face. Hee, if I can't eat it, then you can't eat it either. My mood is much better now that I think about it. Abraham climbed onto the carriage and said, Let's go. My Lord Duke, what about your breakfast? Is there anything worth eating in Chaos City other than Mamie's? I'll eat it when we get back to Rodu. Abraham's voice sounded from the carriage. My lord, Mamie's has suddenly announced that they will be closing for a month. Mr. Mac took Little Boss out to play and collect materials, Dykes said after he finished reporting to Michael. They're closing for a month. Michael looked up from the pile of documents he was reading, and looked at Dykes with surprise. Yes. This is the first time Mamie's has closed for such a long period of time. Dykes nodded, and said with admiration, Only a chef with superb culinary skills like Mr. Mac would dare to close a restaurant for a month when business is at its peak just to take the children out to play. Michael looked at the documents in front of him again. He was afraid that Meg didn't just take the children out to play this time. The news of the massacre of the entire family of the officials from the Ministry of War in Rodu had reached Meg yesterday, and he closed the restaurant today. There must be some connection between the two. However, Michael didn't probe further. He wasn't in a position to tell Alex and Irina what to do, let alone report to him. Oh, yes, my lord. In the morning paper sent back from the Twilight Forest today, Oster announced that the August tribe was responsible for the Rodu massacre, and gave a stern warning to the Roth Empire. If the Roth Empire dares to invade the Twilight Forest again, they will be attacked even more severely. Dykes pulled out an urgent letter from a pile of secret letters. This idiot. Michael took the letter, and read it with a frown. You don't think it was the orcs who did it? Dykes was a little surprised by Michael's reaction. The orcs should be the ones who had the most motive and power to do this, and Oster admitted it himself. Although Oster isn't very smart, he can't even take care of himself now. How would he have the ability to organize a massacre in Rodu? Michael shook his head. Then why did he admit it? This idiot most likely wants to absorb those tribes that left the war, so he forced himself to admit it. Anyway, looking at the current situation, the Roth Empire shouldn't take the risk of being attacked by all the other tribes to launch another war on the Twilight Forest, Michael said in a low voice. But if that's the case, the Roth Empire will be riled up, and Andre will have a legitimate reason to deploy his troops. It won't be difficult for him to take down the August tribe again. Dykes also frowned when he heard that. Michael put down the secret letter in his hand, and said to Dykes, Get ready. I'm going to write a letter to the Falk tribe. It's the truce period now, and all parties have to deal with things calmly. Once the situation goes out of control, the Norland continent might be dragged into a new round of racial war. By then, no one would be able to turn the tables. Vanessa, who was sitting by the window, put down the gourmet magazine in her hand, and held the heater in her hand. She looked at the barren branches outside the courtyard wall, and worriedly said, "I heard something big happened outside. I wonder how the situation is." "It's so worrying." Laura placed a plate of snacks in front of Vanessa, and softly said, "Princess, you're not thinking of running out again, are you?" "Nonsense. Am I such an insensible person?" Vanessa widened her eyes, and pretended to be fierce. However, her widened eyes made her look even cuter. "Of course not." Laura nodded. "Laura, look at this dessert box. It's big and round. Doesn't it look like the basin of the hot pot? No pop-up window." Chapter 1995. Rodu was a majestic city. It was also the largest city on the Norland continent. After the war among species, the Roth Empire built this huge city amidst the ruins and barren land. The city was divided into dozens of markets of the same size, and the royal palace was located in the center of the city. The layout was rather similar to Chang and in the Tang dynasty. However, these markets weren't separated by walls, and their functions weren't very logical. Apart from a few areas where the rich and powerful gathered, the rest of the markets were a little chaotic. Romo Street was a not-so-famous food street near the royal palace and the offices of the various departments of the royal court. Although it was called a food street, the scattered restaurants and taverns seemed a little shabby. The adults don't seem to want to eat here recently. Business isn't good. A burly boss stood at the entrance of a restaurant, yawning as he leaned against the doorpost. "Don't mention it. I heard something big happened in the royal court recently. The adults are all in a state of panic. They don't even dare to come for a drink." The seductive female boss of the tavern next door took a deep puff from her silver pipe, and then blew out the white smoke with a dazed look. "Exactly. Business isn't good this year. The tavern next door is being sold again. This is the 5th one this year, right? It's all because a few new restaurants, taverns, and brothels have opened on Lamb Street. The adults are all gone. If this continues, our Romo Street is really going to be finished." A few more shop owners complained that business was difficult. The shop owners were all frowning, but there was nothing they could do. Not far away, two people were walking over slowly. Mr. Hades, Lamb Street's popularity, location, and business atmosphere are all the best in this area. Especially in the past 2 years, Lamb Street has become the first choice of entertainment for all of the court officials. "Are you sure you don't want to consider the shops that I showed you just then?" A middle-aged man with a full beard was standing beside Mag, who had already put on a disguise, and was trying his best to persuade him. "The location is good, but the layout and size don't meet my requirements." Meg rejected expressionlessly. After coming to Chaos City, Meg began to look for the shops that the tavern needed. He was not really here to open a shop. His main goal was to find Joshua and gather information. That was why Meg chose this area where the officials of the royal court were gathered. If Josh were to return to Rodu and his plan failed, he would definitely continue to stir up trouble. Compared to the commoners, it was easier to blow things up by attacking the officials of the imperial court. And judging from the way he controlled the Ministry of War to start the war, he might have even more tricks up his sleeve. A professional should do what a professional should do. Meg found an intermediary, and started looking for a shop right away. Lamb Street was indeed very lively, but because it was too lively, it was excluded by Meg. On the contrary, Romo Street, which was located behind Lamb Street, was much quieter, and there were more shops to choose from. This made Meg quite satisfied. Seeing that Meg wasn't interested, the agent tactfully stopped recommending shops on Lamb Street. Instead, he smiled and said, "This is Romo Street, a very famous food street nearby. There are many restaurants and pubs on this street, Meg listened to his introduction, and nodded from time to time to show that he was listening. His gaze swept across the shops on both sides of the street. He could tell that this place was indeed prosperous in the past. Yes, in the past. Now, shops that had closed down and were being sublet could be seen everywhere on both sides of the street. Furthermore, it seemed like they had closed down for a long time, and had not found anyone to take over. Meanwhile, the owners and employees of the shops that were still open were chatting while sunbathing. Judging from the employees' lackadaisical attitude and the owner's unconcealable worry, the business environment here had deteriorated to the point where it was impossible to continue operating. Look, another fool has been brought here by Big Head to look after the shop. I wonder if he will fall for it. The tavern owner looked at Meg in a daze with a hint of mockery in her smile. Look at how silly he looks. One look and I can tell that he is a newbie. He will definitely rush to pay up after hearing some flattery and step into the abyss. Hee, we have another fellow sufferer now. The various owners were also looking at Meg with smiles. Although they were somewhat gloating, they did not have any ill intentions. Mr. Hades, there is a tavern up ahead that is currently being sold. You can go take a look. Whether it is the shop, decoration, or layout, they all meet your requirements. The middleman, Fitch, brought Meg to the shop that had the sign Lank's Tavern hanging on it not far away. Meg stood outside the door and looked. It was a standalone two-story building. The height was not bad, and there was some distance between it and the shops on both sides. The signboard was very ordinary. Of course, this was not important to Meg. This tavern used to be doing very well, but something happened to the owner's family, and he was unable to continue operating. Therefore, he reluctantly sold it. If you want it, you can buy it directly. Business will definitely explode with a little renovation. Fitch took out his key and opened the door as he spoke. It had been a long time since a shop on Romo Street had been sold or sublet. Recently, more and more businesses had left the area, and it had become increasingly desolate. He was just trying his best. As long as one wasn't a complete newbie, one would normally not come to a place like this to rent or buy a shop. Of course, this Mr. Hades looked like a newbie, so he decided to give it a try and see if he could get the first order of the month. Meg allowed him to exaggerate as much as he wanted and only agreed out of politeness. He couldn't believe a single word of the real estate agent's nonsense. He pushed open the door and saw that it was an ordinary tavern. The tables and chairs were randomly placed, and there were a few empty wine bottles on the wine cabinet. There was nothing special about it, nor was there anything particularly bad about it. Of course, being ordinary was a restaurant's original sin. Meg looked around and said to Fitch, who was about to make an introduction, "Let's take this one. Call the owner over and discuss the price." Fitch was stunned, but quickly came back to his senses and said uncertainly, "Mr. Hades, are you saying that you intend to buy this shop?" "Yes, I think it's quite suitable." Meg nodded. "Oh. Okay, please wait a moment. I'll go find the owner of this shop and finalize the contract today." Fitch tried his best to control his expression and hurriedly wiped down a stool with his sleeve. He invited Meg to sit down and then quickly walked out the door. "I didn't think that I'd really run into an idiot." Fitch was wild with joy. As an intermediary trainee who had practiced for 2.5 years, he still hadn't mastered the golden art of deception in the intermediary world. He relied entirely on luck to get the order. This customer didn't seem to know much about the business, but he was also very picky and belonged to the category that was difficult to deal with. Although the price of a shop on Romo Street wasn't as high as that on Lamb Street, the price of a building like this wasn't cheap either. If he could get the deal done, the intermediary fee would be enough to feed him for half a year. Chapter 1996. The sale proceeded very smoothly. Meg was able to strike a bargain with the seller, and he was able to secure the house in the center of Rodu for 1,051 copper coins. That's a bargain for you. The seller took the banknotes and left with a pained expression. If it weren't for the fact that Romo Street was going to be completely desolate and there weren't many ghosts to be seen in a day, how could he be willing to sell the house at a loss of 1 million yuan? Awesome. Meanwhile, Fitch gave Mag a thumbs up with an expression of admiration. He had paid Mag a fair sum of money, but he had indeed misjudged Mr. Hades. This was no newbie. He was more like a wily old fox than a newbie. This is much cheaper than Chaos City. Should I buy the entire street? Meg looked at the deed in his hand and fell into deep thought. Mr. Hades. Fitch took the money and prepared to leave. Meg looked up at Fitch and asked, "How many more houses on Romo Street do you have?" "Ha!" Fitch's eyes widened. In less than half a day, the news that a mysterious idiot had purchased half of Romo Street had spread like wildfire among all the businesses on Romo Street. Mr. Hades, you really have a good eye. I'm sure business on Romo Street will be booming under your management. Fitch looked at Meg with a glowing expression. He had sold more houses in less than half a day than he had in his entire career. There were a total of 100 buildings, and he had earned over 2 million copper coins just from the commission alone. He could retire right away, build a house, and marry a wife. I also believe that will be the case. Meg placed the stack of deeds into a box beside him. Of course, he didn't need that many houses to open a tavern. However, after Mamis became popular, the prices of the shops on the southwestern corner of the Aden Square had doubled in just a few months. It wasn't in his nature to not take advantage of the low prices to buy half of the street. Then, I wish you a happy life. I'll be taking my leave now. Fitch bowed deeply to Meg before skipping away. He was as elated as a little deer. Of course, the first thing was to resign and leave this place, in case this cute fool suddenly changed his mind and came looking for him. Interesting. Meg smiled as he watched Fitch's departing figure. He turned around and closed the door. Don't tell me that idiot bought half the street. Eiffel said in disbelief as she removed the pipe from her mouth. Although his brain isn't very good, he's really rich. More than 100 buildings, no matter how cheap it is, it'll be over 100 million. The fat boss next to him munched on sunflower seeds with a look of envy. TSK. I wonder why he bought so many buildings. I'm quite curious. Everyone chimed in, showing great interest in this new neighbor. Meg didn't stay in the tavern for too long. His main purpose was to discuss the tavern's renovation with the system. The tavern was about 150 square meters. Compared to the restaurant, it didn't need a kitchen that was too big. The wine cellar could also be placed on the second floor. It could accommodate quite a number of customers. Let's do it like this. It'll be simple and crude. It'll feel better if I drink strong alcohol. Meg decided on the renovation style and went out to look for a construction team. Of course, the renovation would be left to the system. After all, there were so many neighbors around. He still had to find a construction team to put on an act. Hi, how are you, new neighbor? Nice to meet you. A charming young woman walked up to Meg with a smile as soon as he walked out. She extended her hand to him. I'm Eiffel, the lady boss of the Titan Tavern over there. My beloved concubine. Meg glanced at the Titan Tavern opposite him. It was decorated in the style of a giant. He politely shook the lady boss' hand. Hello, I'm Hades. I'm also planning to open a tavern. The smell of perfume and tobacco mixed together was surprisingly pleasant. However, he still preferred the pure natural body fragrance of the young girl. "Oh, if you want to open a tavern, you can ask me for advice. My skills are very good." Eiffel leaned forward. Her voice became soft and charming. She opened her mouth and was about to blow into Meg's ear. "Okay, let's learn from each other when we're free." Meg dodged to the side and left. "Humph, little guy. Do you think you can escape from my hands like this?" Eiffel looked at Meg's back as he left. Her gaze stopped at his buttocks for a while. Her smile became brighter as she whispered to herself, "His body is not bad." The construction team quickly entered the tavern. First, they dismantled everything in the tavern and moved them out. Then. There was no then. That night, Meg directly checked into the tavern that was newly renovated by the system. The tavern's main color was brown. It was basically decorated with logs. The style was rough and simple. There were very few partitions. There was a big wine cabinet behind the bar. There was a small kitchen beside the bar. It was about 10 square meters. It was used to cook dishes. Other than a wine cellar, the second floor was still the living area as usual. Meg didn't change the exterior of the tavern. However, he removed the original signboard and some of the fancy decorations and replaced it with a new signboard, Saipan Tavern. Nothing much. He just felt that the name was very catchy. Saipan, right? He felt it immediately. He felt that it would be popular. As for a small and refreshing name like Oyi Tavern, in a dangerous place like Rodu, it was best not to give people the chance to think about it. "You finished it in a day." Irina looked around the newly renovated tavern and was a little surprised. "I'm quite talented in this aspect." Meg smiled. "Shameless." A line of small words floated across his mind. "Not bad. This seat is mine from now on." Irina sat down on a high chair behind the bar. She was in charge of the tavern's finances and had a good view of the entire tavern. It was indeed the center seat. "Ugly duckling, you can just squat here and be an emotionless fortune duck." Amy placed Ugly Duckling on the bar and nodded with satisfaction. Annie, on the other hand, was extremely interested in the barware on the bar counter. She fiddled with it carefully and her eyes were filled with curiosity. "And, do you want to learn how to bartend?" Meg asked with a smile. This bartending set was completely for decoration. He sold ready-made wine, not live bartending. He also didn't perform bartending for customers. And nodded. She pointed to the bartending set and said in sign language, "I've seen bartenders on the tablet. They're very handsome." "I see. Then you can learn to play by yourself," Meg said with a smile. He bought a batch of ingredients and drinks for bartending from the system. Then, he found some bartending tutorials for Anne so that she could learn by herself. Other children played with mud from a young age, while their children played with bartending from a young age. There didn't seem to be much of a difference. They were all just playing. Meg looked at the two little ones who were already excitedly preparing the bartending set. "You can play, but you can't drink the bartending set." "Of course, I can be your bartending tester. I'm quite professional in this aspect." Knock, knock. Right at this moment, there was a knock on the door. Chapter 1997. Who is it? It's the middle of the night. I just moved in and you're already here. Irina was puzzled. Maybe it's a neighbor. I'll go take a look. Meg didn't know who it was, but he didn't feel any killing intent or powerful aura. It was just a normal human. Meg opened the door, and a delicate body fell into his arms right away. A pair of hands even wrapped around his neck, and a seductive voice sounded. Mr. Hades, you're so naughty. You suddenly opened the door and made me fall into your arms. But I like it very much. The atmosphere in the tavern instantly froze. Father, danger. Amy's eyes widened. She didn't know if she should write today's diary. Meg looked at AI Faye in his arms and his neck stiffened. He could already feel the cold killing intent behind him. Wife, listen to my excuses. Meg's mind was about to collapse. He quickly helped AI Faye up and said seriously, Miss AI Faye, please be more respectful. Love concubine. You're going to seal it just like that. Irina had already picked up a stool. Oh, Mr. Hades, why are you treating me like an outsider? I'm here to learn from you. AI Faye's eyes were blurred. She twisted her waist and was about to pounce on Meg again. Meg quickly took 2 steps back. AI Faye missed and looked up. Her seductive eyes just happened to meet 5 pairs of eyes in the tavern. An elegant and beautiful woman, a delicate and cute little loli, a beautiful little girl, a round orange cat, and a helpless Hades. Clearly, this was a family that could be seen with the naked eye. After being stunned for quite a while, AI Faye suddenly came back to her senses. She immediately withdrew her hand and almost stood at attention as she revealed an embarrassed yet polite smile. Ahaha. I'm the landlady of the tavern across the street. I especially came here to say hello to Mr. Hades and his family. Just now, I drank a lot with the guests and was a bit drunk. I almost fell down. Fortunately, Mr. Hades helped me up. Nice to meet you, Mr. Hades. I don't think he just wanted to help you up. He wanted to help you all night. Irina said with a faint smile. The air seemed to become colder. This woman is not to be trifled with. AI Faye glanced at Irina, who was holding onto the chair's armrest. She was also someone who had seen the world, and she immediately sensed the ice-cold killing intent, which made her have the urge to retreat. Then you guys have a good rest. You must be tired after the first day of moving. See you tomorrow. AI Faye pretended she didn't understand and left. Phew. Out of the door, Ify let out a long sigh and stomped her feet in shame. Didn't we agree to be a golden bachelor? That's right. It's rare to see neighbors who hug each other the moment they meet, call each other beloved concubine, and even invite each other to spar with each other, Irina said with a smile. The smile on Meg's face gradually stiffened, and he said a little guiltily, It's not what you think it is. What do you think I'm thinking? Irina asked with a smile. Air. Meg was as thin as a blue mushroom. He felt even more wronged than Doe-e. He looked at the 2 children and said, Look, the 2 children are still here. Father, we're going upstairs to play. Amy and tidied up the wine glasses and tactfully gave the 2 adults enough space. We're the only ones left. Irina picked up a chair. I think we can still have a good talk. Meg gulped. Patter. The chair fell to the ground, and Meg subconsciously pulled back his feet. He looked at the chair in front of him, and then looked at Irina, who had a faint smile on her face. Don't be nervous. Sit down and talk. Irina sat down on the high chair and looked down at Meg. Meg sat upright and looked at Irina, who was sitting on the high chair, and felt like he was being judged. Actually, I don't know her. I only met her in the afternoon and greeted her. She must have taken a liking to how rich I am, so she came to blackmail me, Mag explained. Go on. Irina crossed her arms and remained unmoved. You don't know, but it's getting more and more dangerous for men out there. There are always some women who approach men with bad intentions and try to take advantage of them. Although I've tried my best to protect myself, sometimes it's impossible to guard against them, Meg continued to explain. Is that so? Irina didn't seem to believe him. Meg was about to cry. If he had known, he would have used the mighty heavenly dragon on that vixen as soon as he opened the door. Then, he wouldn't have so many problems. By the way, honey, I've bought this street for you. From now on, you're not only the lady boss of this tavern, but also the prettiest landlady on this street. Meg suddenly remembered something important. He stood up and took out a box from behind the counter. He put it on the bar with a bang and then opened the box, revealing a whole box of deeds. His tone became more confident. Most women would say, honey, you look so handsome when you take out the box. Irina glanced at the box and narrowed her eyes. She looked at Meg and said, where did you get the money? Damn. Meg cursed in his heart. He had been so calculative, but he had forgotten that the family's finances had already fallen into Irina's hands, and every single cent that he was spending now was his private stash. Would you believe me if I said I picked it up? Do you think I would? I just got some money a few days ago. It's not much. How much? That's all. Keep it well. Meg took out a mountain of gold from the empty space in the middle of the tavern. That's all. It's really all gone. Are you sure? There's really not a drop left, Grandpa. We've been wandering in this mountain for 2 days, and we haven't seen a single ghost. Could it be that we're going in the wrong direction? Noah sat on the steelback eagle's neck and said as he chewed on some dry food. From the weak reaction of the turtle shell stone, we're going in the right direction. It's just that the path is very messy. It's not easy to find him, Melander said with his eyes closed. The turtle shell stone floated in front of him and rotated gently. Right at this moment, he suddenly opened his eyes and reached out to grab a humanoid talisman. News from Mr. Mac. Noah turned around and asked excitedly. Let's go to Rodu. Melander glanced at the white talisman in the shape of a humanoid talisman. The talisman was quickly engulfed by a ball of green flames. Really? Noah's eyes lit up. They had been wandering in the mountains for 2 days. They couldn't eat well and couldn't stay warm. It was so frustrating. It was simply exciting to be able to go to a big city like Rodu. Chapter 1998. Find the culprit. No matter who it is, I want him dead. Andre's furious voice echoed in the royal study. All the ministers trembled, and didn't dare to say anything. His Majesty's anger was understandable. The case of the ministers from the Ministry of War was still being investigated, and the results had yet to come out. In the end, these ministers' families were wiped out, and it was in Rodu. This was like a slap to the powerful Roth Empire's face. Furthermore, this matter also made all the ministers fearful. They thought it was very safe in Rodu, but they didn't expect that someone would dare to wipe out the entire family of a high-ranking official in Rodu. This meant that they could be the next ones to die. Andre calmed himself down slightly and said to the ministers, from now on, the Empire will enter a first-level war preparation. Begin to transport resources and soldiers to the front lines. We will be ready for war. Yes. All the ministers bowed in agreement. Dismissed. Andre stood up and left. The ministers bowed to send him off. Have you found out who did it? Andre asked in a low voice as he went up the star-picking deck. Your Majesty, from the traces left behind at the scene, it should be done by orcs. To be able to do this, it should be at least a 10th tier orc. However, according to the investigation, the 10th tier orcs were all in the Twilight Forest that day, so these traces could be faked. A shadow gradually materialized behind him, and a person wrapped in a black robe bowed slightly as he answered. Oster, this son of a bitch, is indeed puffing himself up at his own cost. Given his guts, how would he dare to provoke me at such a time? Andre sneered. The man in black remained silent and didn't reply. Continue to investigate. I want to see who dares to do such a thing in my rodu, Andre ordered. Yes, the man in black replied. His body gradually turned illusory, and then completely disappeared into the night. After handing over half of his private stash, Meg was finally spared from death. These two are really carved from the same mold. Meg looked at Irina, who was happily counting that mountain of gold, with a helpless expression. However, today's incident also reminded Meg that he couldn't casually talk about sparring with a woman he didn't know. Otherwise, it would be really hard to explain if she came looking for a sparring session in the middle of the night. Are you going out tonight? Irina suddenly looked up at Meg. Meg nodded. Yes, I've made an appointment with someone. I plan to visit the homes of the military officials whose families were massacred tonight to confirm if it was Josh who did it. Then I'll go with you. I'm more sensitive to the black fog. Irina waved her hand and collected all the gold, silver, and jewels on the ground. Okay, it'll be easier to find him with you around. Meg flattered him. Of course. The corners of Irina's mouth curled up slightly. Obviously, she enjoyed it very much. Soon, there was another knock on the door. Meg was surprised at first, wondering if he had invited other women to spar with him today. However, 9 short knocks and 1 long knock quickly calmed him down. He opened the door, and sure enough, Melander and Noah were standing outside, looking travel-worn. Both of them were stunned when they saw Meg, who opened the door. Immediately, they became alert. It's me. Come in. Meg had changed his face with the transformational mask, so it was normal that the two of them couldn't recognize him. Hearing Meg's voice, the two of them came to a realization and went into the restaurant. The warm tavern made both of them relax a little. Noah's gaze quickly noticed Irina standing beside the counter. His eyes were filled with surprise, but he quickly retracted his gaze politely and turned to look at Meg with a sad face. Mr. Mac, is there anything to eat? I've been flying in the mountains on the Steelback Eagle for 2 days. I'm starving. Meg looked at the two of them. In such weather, flying in the mountains on an unprotected Steelback Eagle for 2 days was indeed tiring. You can wash your hands and face over there. I'll make you something to eat. Meg pointed at the toilet at the side and walked towards the kitchen. Hello, sister-in-law. Noah greeted Irina politely. Although it was rare to see such an elegant and beautiful woman, he could feel how terrifying she was. It was a feeling he only had when facing his grandfather. This meant that this beautiful woman was already a 10th-tier powerhouse. Killing him was no different from stepping on an ant. As for Mr. Mac's strength, his grandfather didn't have the confidence to defeat him. The ingredients were still used freely, but Meg didn't plan to sell any dishes from Mamie's in the tavern. After a while, Meg made a plate of Yangzhou fried rice for each of them. It was simple and fast. Thank you, Mr. Mac. I'll help myself. Noah picked up the spoon and devoured the Yangzhou fried rice. He couldn't stop himself from immersing himself in the delicious taste of the Yangzhou fried rice. Isn't this too delicious? After licking the plate, Noah exclaimed in admiration. He felt warm all over and the exhaustion of the past 2 days had been swept away. I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. Melander also put down the spoon with a puzzled expression. Grandpa, what can't you figure out? Noah asked curiously. Meg and Irina also looked at him with puzzlement. Melander was also puzzled. How can the food made by a powerhouse be so delicious? Meg was quite satisfied with this kind of flattery. If it weren't for the fact that he had an official event to attend tonight, he might have cooked a few more dishes for him and sat down to have a drink or two. Let's get down to business now that you're done eating. Did you find anything on your way up north? Meg asked the two of them. We found some scattered devilish aura, but it's hard to tell where it is. Melander shook his head and looked at Meg. You asked us to come to Rodu. What did you find? Meg said, there were a few massacres in Rodu last night. The victims were the family members of the ministers of the Ministry of War who were involved in the war against the orcs. Their methods were cruel, and they all set their houses on fire in the end. I suspect that Josh has something to do with this. He might have already returned to Rodu. Let's go and take a look at the scene. Melander stood up with a grave expression. Meg wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he looked at Melander and Noah and said, this is Rodu. It's a bit of an exaggeration to say that 10th-tier beings are everywhere, but it's not like the wilderness. You have to be careful. It'll be troublesome if you're targeted. When it comes to concealing our whereabouts and reducing our presence, I'm afraid there's no other race in this world that can compare to us ghosts. Melander's smile was filled with confidence and composure. Then let's go. We'll take a look at the scene. Meg nodded. In the night, the group disappeared from Romo Street in the blink of an eye. The turtle shell stone is very active. It has indeed appeared in Chaos City recently. Melander looked at the specks of golden light on the turtle shell stone with a grave expression. Chapter 1999. This is the mansion of an official from the Ministry of War. It is said that more than 120 people in the mansion are all dead. Only the official who was imprisoned in the heavenly prison was left. After hearing about the incident last night, he also committed suicide by hitting his head against the wall. Meg and the others were on a roof, looking at the scorched courtyard not far away. There is demonic energy there. A very dense demonic energy. Irina narrowed her eyes slightly and said with a serious expression. You can see demonic energy too. Melanti looked at Irina in surprise. Do you think this is a unique ability of the Ghost Clan? Irina curled her lips. It's just that there are very few people who have this ability. Melander shook his head and turned his gaze back to the mansion that had been burned to the ground, his expression solemn as he said, I can be sure that this massacre and the massacre in the Twilight Forest were committed by the same person. The demon Chi is of the same origin. However, he must have been in a hurry to commit the crime. He only absorbed part of the resentment and souls. If we can enter the ruins, we should be able to get more information from the ghosts. There are guards at the scene. Look, there are two over there. There is another one hiding on the roof. The surrounding area is surrounded by official mansions. After such an incident, the patrols have been strengthened. There are more than 10 patrol teams patrolling. Any business will attract them. If you are confident, you can go down and take a look. Meg said calmly. However, 1 7th level and 2 6th level is still easy to deal with. Melanti grinned. He took a step forward and disappeared into the night like a ghost. After a while, the 3 knights on the roof and at the door in the distance fell into a daze. A hazy concealment array rose in the middle of the ruins, making it impossible to see the situation inside. Concealment and deceit are one of the innate abilities of the Ghost Clan. Noah smiled and explained with a little pride. That's it. Irina smiled. This is already very powerful. Noah nodded. Little friend, you should see more of the world. Irina shook her head and did not say anything else. If it were not for the fact that he could not defeat them, Noah would have said something else. Not long after, the concealment array in the ruins disappeared. Melanthe returned to Meg and the others. The three knights also regained consciousness. They looked around in confusion as if they didn't realize what had happened to them. "How is it?" Meg looked at Morant and asked. Melander's expression was solemn as he said, "It is indeed the same black-robed man as the one in the twilight forest. I can't see his face clearly, but whether it is his figure or his attacking habits, they are all the same. Moreover, he faked the scene in an attempt to frame the beast men." Meg nodded slightly. The situation was exactly as he had expected. "In that case, let's start looking for him. Perhaps he's still in Rodu." "All right." Melanthe took out the tortoiseshell stone again, but this time it was slightly different. He injected a wisp of remnant soul into the tortoiseshell stone. This is a remnant soul of one of the victims. It's filled with resentment. This way, we can trace it back and lock onto this black-clothed man within the detection range, Melanthe explained. This method is really advanced. Meg couldn't help but praise. As the remnant soul was injected into the tortoiseshell stone, a twisted ghostly face appeared on the tortoiseshell stone. At the same time, a blood-red spot of light appeared and started to scurry around on the tortoiseshell stone. The golden spot of light that was originally shining faintly also started to flicker. 3 minutes later, Melanthe raised his head and shook his head slightly as he said, "I'm afraid he's already been alerted and left Rodu. Is there a way to conceal the devilish aura and then hide?" Meg asked with furrowed brows. Theoretically speaking, such a situation shouldn't occur. The tortoiseshell stone is a divine item. It has a very sensitive ability to detect devilish aura. Furthermore, with the enhancement of this resentment, unless he's powerful enough to ensure that even a wisp of devilish aura leaks out, he will definitely be detected by the tortoiseshell stone. Melanthe shook his head. If he starts to change his location after each shot, then it will be a little troublesome. Meg's brows were tightly furrowed. He had thought that he would have a chance to find Josh once he reached Rodu, but this guy had become even more cunning than before. The closer we get to him, the more effective the tortoiseshell stone's detection ability will be. "Let's take a look around Rodu and see if we can discover anything," Melanthe said. "All right, be careful. If you encounter any trouble, you can come find me at the Saipan Tavern." Meg nodded. Splitting up would reduce the number of targets. After watching Melanthe and Noah disappear into the distance, Irina turned to Meg with furrowed brows, and asked, "Why do you think Josh is doing this?" "He's obviously lusting after my wife." Meg thought to himself as he looked at Irina, who was still as beautiful and elegant as ever, even though she had disguised herself as a human. "However," he said, "he's probably become too full of himself. He wants to become the king and control everything. He's been hiding for so many years. Even though he's the second prince, he's already a strong contender for the throne. Even Sean doesn't have absolute confidence in being able to defeat him. Why would he suddenly do something like this at a time like this and completely eliminate himself? It's very puzzling. Maybe my kill warning provoked him." Meg felt that this was the only reason. "Then what do we do now?" Irina looked at Meg and asked. Meg grinned, "Let's go home and sleep. We'll wait for news. Just don't alert him. Look, the tavern over there seems to be pretty good." "I don't think that's a good idea. The 2 children are still at home, they should be asleep by now. I've set up a defensive formation outside the tavern. No one can get in." "All right, let's eat and drink." Meg nodded. 2 hours later, the 2 of them returned to the tavern a little tipsy. As soon as they opened the door, they saw Amy, who had her hands on her hips, and who was lying on the table, looking a little sleepy. They looked at each other, and the atmosphere was a little awkward. "Father, Mother, did you go eat something delicious behind our backs again? Amy said with some hidden bitterness. Aw. We actually just went for a walk. Burp. Although Meg was trying very hard to control himself, he still couldn't help but burp. Yes, we had roast lamb leg. It was delicious, Irina said with a smile. Aw. You're too much. You didn't even bring us along to eat roast lamb leg. I'm going to cry. Amy pursed her lips, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes. Meow, meow, Ugly Duckling stretched lazily, and casually exchanged a few meows as agreement. Meg went up with a smile, and patted Amy's head as he consoled her. All right, if you want to eat, Father can make it for you now. Spicy crayfish, roast lamb kebabs, roast beef kebabs, roast fish. Tell me what you want to eat. Chapter 2000. Supper was wonderful if one was not afraid of gaining weight. Meg put the plates and bowls into the dishwasher, and the cupboard would automatically send the dishes into the cupboard after it was done. Are you satisfied? Meg asked with a smile as he came out of the kitchen and looked at Amy, who was resting on Ugly Duckling's stomach. Yes, Father's crayfish and grilled fish are really delicious. Amy nodded, but she quickly raised her head with a serious expression, and said, but next time when you have supper, don't forget about us again. All right, I will definitely do that next time. Meg nodded with a smile. The children went upstairs to sleep. After washing up, Meg lay on the bed alone and opened the two shiny experience bags in his mind. The experience and information regarding the drunkard's peanut and the pig's ears salad flooded in instantly. After closing his eyes and digesting for a while, Meg pushed open the door to the test field for the god of cookery. Peanuts were a first-class side dish that went well with alcohol. Furthermore, it was rumored that they had a special effect of detoxifying alcohol. For example, if you had eaten 2 peanuts multiple times, you wouldn't have gotten so drunk. All these showed that peanuts had an unshakable position in the drunkard's world. Meanwhile, the drunkard's peanut was one of the best. It was as if it was custom-made for drunkards, and it had made a name for itself in the drunkard's world. The spicy and crispy drunkard's peanut was just right to be paired with cold and delicious beer or mellow and soft moutai. The stir-frying method of the drunkard's peanut was very simple. At least, in Meg's opinion, it was an extremely simple and easy dish to make. As for the pig's ears salad, after having the experience of making the spicy beef and beef lung slice, it was just as easy and quick to make. The whole body of a pig was a treasure. Apart from the soft and crispy pig's ears, the pig's nose and tongue were also first-class ingredients for the salad. If he made the pig's tongue according to the method of making bacon, and let it dry naturally for a period of time before cooking it simply as a salad, it would be full of flavor. Generally speaking, drunkard's peanuts would be soaked in cold water, peeled, and then fried in a wok. Then, they would be ready to serve after stir-frying with chili and pepper. As for the master's drunkard's peanuts, they were soaked in the spicy marinade for 2 hours, peeled and frozen for 12 hours, then deep-fried until slightly yellow. Then, they were added with dried chili and pepper to stir-fry until they were flavorful. After that, the fried peanuts were poured into the wok to stir-fry, then turned off the heat and added in white sugar, pepper and salt and quickly mixed well. The drunkard's peanuts made in this way were spicy and crispy, spicy and sweet. It could be said to be an excellent accompaniment to wine. A drunkard's peanut with a terrible appearance. Failure. A set of fragrant drunkard's peanuts, failure. A portion of drunkard's peanuts that are too spicy. Failure, alright, I've decided to take back what I said earlier. This is actually a very difficult dish. Meg sighed in exasperation as he looked at drunkard peanut, whose appearance was close to perfection, but was still deemed a failure by the system. The god of cooking pursued the ultimate perfection, and even the slightest mistake could not be tolerated. That night, Meg was tortured to the brink of death by the peanuts and pig ears in the test field for the god of cooking. However, as an excellent candidate for the god of cooking with excellent qualities, he still won in the end. Moreover, he used the remaining time to successfully experiment with the recipe for the cold mixed pig's tongue. A near-perfect cold mixed pig's tongue. Congratulations to the host for creating the first delicacy without a recipe. New achievement obtained, Imagination Replicator. Additional reward obtained, 3 chances to use the test field for the god of cooking. Power of Faith plus 10,000. Host, please continue to work hard and replicate and create even more delicious dishes. The system's voice sounded, and a bouquet of flowers even appeared in the test field for the god of cooking. There's a reward. Meg was a little surprised. This cold mixed pig's tongue was based on the memories of his previous life, as well as the experience he gained from the cold mixed pig's ears and sliced beef and tongue in chili sauce. It was also a newly created dish after countless failures. Just imagining the replicator out of thin air was a little exaggerated. No matter what, Meg was very satisfied with the sense of achievement of creating a dish step by step without the help of the recipe provided by the system. Looks like there are 3 dishes in Saipan Tavern now. Meg nodded with satisfaction, and then left the test field for the god of cooking. When he opened his eyes, he saw 4 heads surrounding him. "Father, you slept in today," Amy said with a smile. "I'm hungry." Irina also had a smile on her face. In the past, she could eat breakfast prepared when she woke up, but she was not used to it today. And, on the other hand, showed a sweet smile, and used sign language to say good morning to Meg. Meow. Ugly Duckling rolled around beside Meg, and leaned its head on Meg's arm. One of its little paws pressed on Meg's chest as if it wanted to sleep with him for a while more. "Did you forget to set the alarm?" Meg turned his head to look at the alarm clock at the bedside. To his surprise, it was already 9:00 in the morning. He could not help but exclaim, "So late." Although the flow of time in the test field for the god of cooking had been slowed down, it did take a lot of time to study the cold pig tongue after learning 2 dishes. It was already so late when he opened his eyes. However, it felt really good to be surrounded by his loved ones when he woke up early in the morning. Meg moved Ugly Duckling's head away gently, and got up from the bed with a smile, and asked, "All right, I'll get up to make breakfast for you. What do you all want to eat?" "Mother said she would bring us shopping today, so let's have a simple Yangzhou fried rice." Amy had already changed into a pretty little dress, and a down jacket was also prepared. "All right, wait a moment. It will be ready soon." Meg washed up and went downstairs. Soon, he made 5 servings of Yangzhou fried rice. Ugly Duckling took the initiative to come downstairs and it smelled the aroma. Its appetite had been increasing rapidly recently, and it would only be satisfied after eating a whole serving of Yangzhou fried rice. Until now, Meg still had not found out what species of magic beast this fat orange that could fly was. He did not find out its combat power, but it was getting better and better at acting cute. During breakfast, Meg looked at Ugly Duckling, who was eating the fried rice with its head lowered, and asked, "Oh, by the way, should we change Ugly Duckling's appearance too?" A big, round, orange cat was too recognizable. If Saipan Tavern became famous, it would be easy for people to find out about it. Irina took a look at Ugly Duckling and nodded slightly. "That's necessary. Then let's change it into a swan." Amy swallowed her saliva. Meow. Ugly Duckling looked up at Amy, and suddenly felt that the fried rice on its plate did not taste good. It might be a little difficult to change it into a swan. "Why don't we change it into a panda?" It looks like this. Meg picked up the tablet at the side, and opened a picture of a panda cub. Wow, isn't this panda so cute? I want to raise one. Amy and Anne's eyes were attracted by the cute panda cub in the picture. What kind of magic beast is this? Why haven't I seen it before? Irina was also a little curious. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.